like an
Or let's
80%.
go like 25, 30 and see what happens.
Oh, okay.
And it turns out that as long as you're getting close to failure within that rep range.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the Deficit Podcast, where our mission statement is to bring you good chats, life hacks, and everything in between to stimulate the deficit that you too deal with in your everyday life. I'm joined today with a good friend of mine, TJ. Why don't you tell us who you are?
I'm nobody.
Nobody. All right. I like that.
In kind of the strength and conditioning world, I guess I'm kind of a somebody. I have been involved with fitness for 19 years, give or take. I think I started as a trainer in 2004. I went to school at the University of Alberta and graduated with essentially a degree in sports performance.
Like kinesiology or whatever?
Yeah, kind of like that. My degree is a coaching degree, so it's a little bit more practical than the kin side of things. It's not as science-based.
I didn't know you could get a degree in coaching.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
I don't even know if the program still exists, actually, but it used to be called physical performance or physical activity and sport performance. So that's what I kind of did, and then started getting into the industry. I was really lucky that I got an internship at a high-end hockey training facility.
Oh, nice.
And that kind of put me on the path that I'm on now. I got to work with high-level athletes. And in my day job, working as a trainer, you don't get to do that. But then working as an intern with these high-level athletes. And part of my degree program was it's a 4-month internship. It wasn't like a 30-hour thing that you get in a lot of the other programs. I had to do it for a really long time. I was there for an entire summer.
Wow.
Working 8-hour days. And so it really kind of built this huge amount of respect and desire to work with athletes going forward. Mm-hmm. And so that's essentially what I did. So when I moved to Vancouver, I got involved with Volleyball Canada. And then I opened a gym in 2013 to work with athletes. And that's a whole other conversation. Athletes have no money.
Yeah.
So we ended up training regular people. I was lucky enough to get on with Simon Fraser University as their head strength coach twice.
Oh, wow.
I was the interim head coach in 2015. And then I was there for 4 years between 2017 and 2021.
Wow. So as like a strength coach, you work with, I guess, all the different sports departments.
The university was really interesting. My coaching style in particular is not super conducive to a college environment. SFU is an NCAA school as well, which is highly unusual. It's the only one outside of the U.S.
Really?
Everything else is done out there. We're the only school outside of it. So
wild.
It was interesting. The stuff that I do, again, I've been a strength coach for a really long time. I have a particular methodology and kind of a way of coaching that's not like I'm not a super aggressive person. So the whole screaming and yelling and cheerleading coaching style, that's just not for me. And unfortunately at a university level, particularly with football programs, being kind of one of the big components to it, it didn't always go over very well.
Okay.
We had, kind of a disconnect there. However, a lot of the other sports, that's not the case. I have a background in combat sports, wrestling, and mixed martial arts. And so the wrestling team, and then, of course, the volleyball team that I had come in with from Volleyball Canada, and I kind of, hit things off. And they're really the ones that I've still specialized in. I still train volleyball players and wrestlers and stuff like that. So after the time of university was done, I'm now working with Wrestling Canada. So I've been the strength coach for kind of our world team.
Oh, that's
wicked.
Here. Really?
Yeah, since when did I take that over? 2018. I think so. It's been 5 years now that I've been working with our world team members. So I've got 6 or 8 of them that I work with on a regular basis, and then a whole ton of mixed martial arts athletes. I think I've got 7 or 8 professionals and 10 amateurs, and like I said, a bunch of volleyball players and stuff still. So that's kind of who I am. I don't know if that answered the question. It's a little bit more of a pedigree as opposed to who.
Yeah, I mean, you have your own facility now too. What's it called?
I do. It's called Strong Side Conditioning. So
good name. It's a really good name.
It's funny. So I originally called it Cider Strength after myself, obviously, when we first opened. Yeah. And I had a huge debate when I did it as to whether or not to call it Cider Strength or Strong Side. Mm-hmm. And the inspiration for that was obviously from the Remember the Titans movie, which is a great scene if you've ever seen it. So it just worked. And then so when I had to step away from the gym to work at the university, it made sense to kind of remove my name from it because I was no longer really actively involved for a while.
Okay.
And that's changed. I'm back kind of full time now. I still don't do a lot of day-to-day stuff with the gym, but I train, again, predominantly athletes.
Yeah, and so in your gym, you kind of come up with like customized routines for specific people. Like if you have like a professional football player in or someone who's trying to get in pro, then you can like custom tailor an exercise routine for them. Or
Yeah, everything is custom. So
Yeah.
no matter who you are, it doesn't really matter. We treat kind of regular people the way that I treat athletes. The system doesn't change that much. It just depends on how you're structuring the protocol.
Cool.
So when you come into my facility, I built it because I hate personal training, which is the irony of that, because considering I do it for a living. Look, I'll give you the basic premise. So if you're a reasonably intelligent human being,
Mm-hmm.
if you're working with a trainer one-on-one and outside of really needing that feedback, like somebody's like monitoring you all the time or breathing down your neck, if a good trainer does what they're supposed to do and designs a program for you based on whatever the assessment they're using,
Yep.
okay, we're not going to play favorites, and they teach you to do that program, by the second or third week of doing the same program, because you should be doing that, workouts don't work as well when they're random.
Yep.
You probably know what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't need to cue you on every single exercise. I don't need to tell you what the next one is if you've got it written down somewhere.
Yeah.
So you're paying me to do what then? Count and hand you weights? like I have better things to do with my time, and you have better things to do with your money. So the way that I designed the gym was kind of a hybrid model. So you come in and you learn how to do your program in one of those one-on-one sessions. And again, it's built on an assessment that I've kind of stolen from a bunch of really, really smart people and amalgamated into our own process.
Cool.
And then you get taught how to do it. Then the remainder of the month, it works like a normal gym. So you book in, you come in, you do your workout, it's waiting for you, but it's designed for you. My coaches then float. So when you're trying to figure out an exercise because you don't remember it, you get a little bit of reinforcement.
Cool.
So you're not always having somebody coach you for everything that you're doing. So it's kind of empowering. You have to learn to do your own thing.
Yeah, and then you got someone there to make sure that if they're doing something like a deadlift, the form's right, and they're not going to blow their back out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Or if you did do something dumb, like, hey, I drove for 13 hours yesterday coming back from, Calgary.
Yeah.
Okay, well, deadlifts are in my program today. Maybe we're going to modify that to something else. Like my back's a little sore. Let's do something else. And so my coaches are all really, really good, and that's exactly what they do. They modify, they push when it's needed, they pull back when it's needed.
Cool.
And it's a really, really good system. It's hard to explain outside of a 5-minute conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So the elevator pitch doesn't really work for us, but but it's a really good system. It's done really well for us, and it's quite popular. So
that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
So like you deal with like athletes and average people, I'm assuming. Do you ever have people in with, say, like a sensitive cardio system? Like some people have like there's a thing called POTS, and it's postural-orthostatic tachycardia syndrome.
Okay.
People generally have a resting heart rate of like upwards of 95 to like 100 BPM, and like they have a issue where the signal from their brain telling their legs to push blood up when they stand up, it's a little bit behind. So like they tend to have like issues with circulatory things. They can't stand up too fast, cause them to faint. These things can be mitigated by certain exercises and diet and stuff. But I'm wondering if you ever have clients come through your gym with conditions like that.
That one in particular, no. That's cool though. I'd love to try to work with somebody like that.
I know. I do know one. Yeah,
it's got to be pretty rare. We work with everybody. So the cool part about, again, the way that we've put the gym together is that, I have a background in strength and conditioning, and I'm a therapist. I have a kinesiologist. I actually have 2 kinesiologists on staff.
Oh, wow.
I have a physio on staff as well. And so anything that tends to pop up, we can probably deal with. If we have to involve one of the medical staff, then we involve the medical staff. And again, we don't do anything outside of what, kind of the doctor's orders stuff are. But we've rehabbed just about anything. And again, it doesn't really matter. Like, I don't think there's anything that we've ever encountered where we've gone, hey, this probably isn't for you. I don't think we can help.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from, we've had Bell's palsy come in, people that have partial paralysis. We have,
really?
Yeah, lots of, neuralgias and problems with disc issues. We've had wasting issues, things that had nerve entrapments and people, couldn't move very well. All their strength was gone. I've had
Fuck.
major injuries, car accidents, cancer. Yeah, I mean, a lot of it. It just depends on what it is that you need at that
What
kind
they're
of moment
looking
in time.
for. Yeah.
Yeah, the nice part about strength training in general is, man, exercise is just so adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can do anything with anybody. You just have to find what works. I have if you have time, I'll tell you a story.
We got nothing but time, man. Yeah.
I have one of my very best friends, and I tell this story all the time because anytime I feel unmotivated or like my back hurts or my shoulder hurts from jujitsu last night or whatever, I don't want to go do something, this guy is my motivation because he's like the Terminator or like a RoboCop. Like,
Okay.
first of all, he's hard to kill, and second of all, he just keeps coming back. So he to tell you kind of the long story of his life, and I'll get some facts wrong, and he can yell at me later. But when he was growing up, he was a fairly high level athlete, lacrosse, hockey. And he started developing scoliosis when he was a teenager. And so he's older than I am. And so the surgeries that they used to do to correct it used to be small corrections at a time. So they eventually sandwiched his back between a couple of titanium rods. And I think he had something like 19 surgeries to have it done over the course of a number of years.
Holy shit.
Yeah, right. So already that's a fairly major impact on your day-to-day life.
Although
Although
it sounds medieval. Like,
I mean, it's a little draconian, man. Like the scars on his back are pretty gnarly.
that's insane.
But it didn't really stop him from doing anything. Yeah, he can't twist and bend the same way, but he still did downhill mountain biking. He still was a daredevil on a motorbike. He raced cars. Like, he did all this crazy stuff. Well, racing motorbikes ended up catching up to him. He had a horrific accident. So he T-boned a lady who was on her phone, pulled up from a gas station. Now, they were going too fast and they were running a light, but she also wasn't paying attention. So, unfortunately, on a motorbike, it doesn't matter who's at fault. You are a human projectile.
Yep.
So he T-boned her doing something like 150.
Holy shit.
Yeah. So he broke his hands. He missed the A-pillar of her car by, I think, an inch and, would have killed himself. Broke his helmet. So when he landed on his back, broke his pelvis.
Yeah.
We actually broke one of the rods in his back. We didn't know about it until much, much, much later after I'd met him. And then he skidded on his back until he came in contact with the median. So for those squeamish, don't think about that too badly. But it basically from the knees down, there was nothing left.
Oh my God. Brutal. Holy shit.
And
wow.
so the doctor, he didn't die. The doctors rebuilt him. Like RoboCop, like from pieces.
Yeah. Wow.
We can rebuild him. We can make him better. So they put his body back together again. He was in a wheelchair. He had to relearn how to walk, all these other things. And so on top of all of that, the guy has Charcot-Marie tooth. He's got muscular dystrophy.
Oh my God.
So the recovery process is also really, really challenging for him because he doesn't respond to strength training and exercise the same way, right? His body fights it and he's got a wasting illness. So now, when he came to see me, I have an assessment that I've kind of put together. Basic movement stuff. Can you move your shoulders? How do you look your neck? Can you touch your toes? He could do none of those things. His back doesn't bend. He has, pins and screws and plates and pieces of legs from the knees down. And he has muscular dystrophy, so he doesn't have the same kind of strength anymore that other people do as he gets older.
Jesus.
So the assessment suddenly becomes, well, what can you do?
Yeah.
Like, my assessment is useless now, but let's try to find stuff. Can we put you on a machine and get you to squat? Can we put you on a machine and get you to do some bench press style movements?
Maybe chew.
Yeah. I mean, the guy's in chronic pain. He's tougher than nails. It's insane. So he just tried stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually we got to a point where we could get him to do exercises that were going to improve general movement. We got him stretching, we got him moving, and he was told after his accident, and he went through extensive physio, and as you would, that he would probably never golf again, never ride a motorbike, never ride a horse.
Oh man.
He did all those things.
Good. Oh man, I don't know what I'd do without golf. Fucking...
It's not. I play it, but I play whack fuck. I don't golf. I mean, I have guys that do, but I mean that's my point. You can take anybody that has a massive problem.
Yeah.
And if you approach it in the right way with some genuine curiosity and some compassion, you can find ways to get people to train, right? Like you don't have to assume that everybody needs to train like you do on Instagram, which is generally a bad idea. But yeah, you can just find ways to do it. That's the best part about my job.
Yeah. Wow. So now he's walking around, moving all that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, longer story. He had another accident because he decided to take up downhill mountain biking again, and he missed I don't know, something like a 20-foot decline jump and re-injured
just
himself.
a glutton for
Yeah,
punishment.
I mean,
eh?
the guy, like I said, he's hard to kill, and he came back from that one too. He had to have another back surgery. So yeah, I mean, he's my hero. So
Wow, that's wild.
that's why I say when I'm in pain, I go, yeah, but he walks.
Yeah,
So,
I guess I have no excuse.
yeah, I have no excuse.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of hard to feel like you're having a rough time when you look at a guy who was just like
Yeah,
a sack of meat and
yep,
bones.
absolutely.
Until recently.
Yeah, he was
Wow.
he was in one of those giant like ring halo casts around his pelvis for 6 months or whatever it was. Yeah, it was insane.
Holy shit.
Yeah, so like I said, he's just tough to kill. So he's my inspiration for anything that I have a hard time doing.
And so have you always had this approach at your gym since you opened it? Has it always been that kind of model?
Yeah, luckily. So my background, my learning background was kind of through a little bit of an old school strength and conditioning coach that was, how do you describe Charles? If people are listening to this podcast and they know who Charles Poliquin was, he's kind of larger than life. He said a bunch of stuff that turned out to be not true. He embellished a lot of things, and he was a bit of a savant, but his approach to training was almost wildly technical.
Mm.
And so movement quality, like there was nothing that he did in an exercise program that was flashy. And so most of my approach isn't flashy. So it makes me mad when I see a lot of the stuff online that people are doing just for clout, because it's not.
There are some wild
Dude,
methods.
and the worst part about it is
is
the people that seem to know the least are the ones that are capable of doing the most online, right?
Yeah.
Like they have no shame. So
Yeah.
it's like, I'm just going to put this stuff out there and people are going to gobble it up. And it just turns out that it's not effective, but it looks great. But my approach has always been really technical. And so once I started doing that and got into the therapy side of things, no, it was a pretty easy transition. We've always been probably more conservative with our approach to fitness and exercise. We don't, we used to call ourselves like the cure for CrossFit.
Yeah.
Right. Like when CrossFit first came out and everybody was getting hurt because they didn't have a scaling process for it. That was
when you
big
say
for
a
us.
scaling process.
Well, so CrossFit, for the record, I actually really like CrossFit.
Mm-hmm. I did a little bit myself. In high
Yeah,
school,
and I like it as a sport in particular because as a coach, it's really hard to program for
Mm-hmm.
because you have to build all of these really cool qualities, right? You have to do gymnastics movements and you have to do Olympic lifting and you have to be able to run and
Yeah.
like that's not normal movement. And the idea behind it originally was be good at everything, right? Jack of all trades
Yeah.
kind of an idea.
Peak athleticism.
Yeah.
Sort of vibe,
So
yeah.
now the way that CrossFit has evolved is you have really, really good CrossFit coaches.
Mhm.
And I don't know many gyms out there, even in Vancouver, and it used to be a hotbed for it here, but that are out hurting people. It's just
Okay.
not a thing anymore. I think most CrossFit gyms are 90% great.
Yeah.
You don't see the Instagram or Facebook stuff anymore, YouTube videos of CrossFit fails. It's just not as common. So, but when it started, I owe CrossFit a huge debt because they brought boutique gyms back into the limelight, right? They made them cool again. And so I wouldn't have a business if it weren't for CrossFit because those small gyms just weren't really a thing. You had to go to these high-end personal training studios, and we fit right in this really middle niche-y kind of realm. And so CrossFit was really good. But at the time that I opened, CrossFit was still bad. and so CrossFit's popular. So we kind of operate like CrossFit.
Yeah.
And we charge similar to CrossFit, but you get stuff designed for you and it's safer and
Nice.
yeah.
Custom tailored.
Yeah,
athletics
exactly.
routines.
Like broken, we can fix you.
Yeah.
That was our idea. Yeah.
That's wicked, man. So when it comes to like developing these routines for them and stuff, aside from the exercises, are you guys at all involved in like the diet side of it at all?
We offer it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Do you have a nutritionist? Or?
Yeah. So I don't even know how to describe that. I've been in the business long enough that I've dabbled in just about everything.
Yeah.
So I have nutrition certifications. I've let them go over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 other people that work for me that are that work with precision nutrition, which if you again want to Google stuff, I mean John Berardi, one of the founders of it, is one of the most brilliant minds I think in nutrition around.
Okay.
So yeah, we do offer it. I work more on the sports side of things, but my staff work well with anybody that has other issues. And I'm kind of I tend to collect oddballs when it comes to people that work for me.
The misfits.
Yeah,
that's how we are here too.
Yeah, it works really well. My gym. One of the things that we say all the time is if you don't like gyms, you'll love mine.
Cool.
Because if you don't fit in somewhere else, or you feel, judged, or you're worried about how you look, or
It's hard to first get in there. My wife, she tries to go to the gym every once in a while. She uses the one in our building when she does now, but she's gone to a couple of public gyms with me, and it's always like, unless you've like grown up casually
it's
in gyms,
hard.
yeah, and it's really, especially for the self-esteem, you feel like all the eyes are on you.
Always. Gyms suck, and
Yeah.
everybody is in there to judge or to show off or to get their own, ego stroked. It drives me bonkers. And so we don't have that mentality at the gym. If you are worried about any of those things, that never happens. Or as inclusive a gym as you can, probably ever find.
Well, okay.
Which is great. But the nutrition side of things, the point I was trying to make is, I have had eating disorders. So when I was a teenager, I was obese. I think I stopped weighing at 300 pounds. I didn't look at the scale again after that. When I
Wow.
was about 17. And then I did everything wrong. I starved myself. I abused diet pills. So I have eating disorders. I struggle with them, day to day. And I have staff that have worked that work on the nutrition side of things that are the same. So one of my guys is an ex-football player. He was a lineman, so he was 330 some odd
Was
pounds
he,
when he
like,
played for me.
CFL or college?
College, yeah,
Cool.
college ball. But 330 some odd pounds when he played, and now he weighs in at a cool 230, and he's still strong as hell. And
Probably ripped his shit too.
yeah, I mean, for a big guy, yeah,
Yeah.
as much as he can be. And then I have another staff member, and she deals with kind of the emotional eating side of things and stuff. So we're pretty varied, but we
Well,
can
that's
answer
cool.
most questions. Anything
Yeah.
that we don't, I have a great network we can outsource.
Wild. That's really cool, man. That I had no idea that it was so like personalized and dynamic in that sense.
I think it has to be,
Yeah.
that we make big generalizations about fitness and nutrition all the time, but I have a friend of mine that owns a company that does a bunch of education, and the name of the company is N1, and the idea behind that is you are an N1, right? Everybody's individual, so what works for one person may not work for somebody else,
Yeah.
and that's always the thing that we talk about is if you're going to start an exercise program, which one's the best? The one that you're going to do. Like, if you like lifting weights, great. If you like kickboxing, great. If you like Zumba, dance away, man. Like, you got to do something to move. And if it's the one that you're going to stick to, great. Same thing with diets. When you look at the research, the best diet is the one that you can adhere to. The rest of it is largely irrelevant.
Yeah, it's interesting how like differently our bodies are built individually. Like, my wife a while back, she went to a naturopath because she just wasn't feeling good
Right.
on a day-to-day basis. Found out she actually has an inflammatory response to over 95 different foods.
Nasty.
And like the worst ones were like the ones that she was eating the most.
Yeah,
Like,
that's pretty common. Some of that is just because it's a repeat exposure.
yeah,
So it's like scratching an itch, right? Like
Yeah.
picking a scab, it gets worse because you keep picking at it.
yeah,
So that's not any better. But I think most people, I don't remember what the new numbers are, but there was a statistic for a while that said people eat, I think, between 9 and 13 foods in a week. That's it, different foods. They don't rotate them that much. So common nutrition sense is eat everything, eat a rainbow, eat seasonally, all these things that are theoretically simple. We don't. It's
Yeah.
convenient. So you buy the same stuff all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like, why would I bother buying market fresh stuff and prepping all that when I can just get a box of mac and cheese and some bacon, right? It's like,
Wow. I mean, but bacon is like a superfood.
that's true.
Not
Bacon
because
is
it's a
delicious,
superfood, but have you had bacon?
Yes. You will never go back.
Yeah, right.
Bacon is that's it. That's the one that turns vegans into meat.
If there was
eaters. Yeah.
anything that was going to do it, it was probably going to be
Yeah.
bacon. Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
my diehard, man. Bacon and pork belly, just in general. Like, holy shit,
Now
dude.
you're just making me hungry. Yeah,
I
but
know,
I mean,
yeah.
it's one of those things where your food can have a huge impact on your life, and if
Yeah.
you don't know it's food causing the problem, oh man, that's a nightmare.
Oh yeah, like I've got like an IBS thing going on, and like I didn't realize what was doing it until I started trying to just like eliminate certain things from my diet.
Did
And-
you have any success with it?
Yeah. I first week, the first one I did was I went without dairy,
Right.
no milk, no cheese, anything like that, and suddenly I was starting to feel a lot better on that first
interesting.
movement of the morning, right? And then after that, I cut out gluten and grains for a while, and just supercharged all of a sudden.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It was ironic too, because like all through my high school career and like even in elementary school, I used to have a really hard time in the bathroom.
Right.
Right? Take me forever. You're sitting there. the pain.
Things
and-
aren't moving.
Yeah, you're
Or
sweating.
they're moving too
and,
fast.
like, yeah, exactly. And you're just like you're like praying to God you survive this experience, right? It's this whole thing. And
Get
I
the sweats.
yeah, oh, big time. You're taking the shirt off, right? You just can't handle it anymore.
George Costanza.
Big time, big time. And like, so like all through that, I loved milk.
Right.
I loved milk. And there's like out in Kamloops, there's this dairy farm there called Blackwell Dairy.
Okay.
And I still can't find a chocolate milk like the one that Blackwell Dairy has. They use the homogenized milk, so it's nice and thick.
Yeah.
It's the good stuff, right? And that used to be like my go-to all the time in high school too. I'd always have a fucking jug of this Blackwell Dairy milk, right? And
Well, especially because you wrestled, right?
oh yeah,
Yeah. So I mean, you needed. It's one of those things. People don't understand how much energy you're putting out
Protein,
when you do
man.
that stuff. Yeah.
yeah.
Chocolate milk is nectar of the gods for
Oh,
most athletes when you're on a budget.
Big time, dude. It got me by. It really got me by. And like, it was a sad day when I realized that I couldn't have milk anymore. I can still do some cheeses.
Yeah. Anything? Is it lactose that you're sensitive to, or the casein protein, or did you kind of isolate one or the other?
I'm not really sure which. I know that I can eat certain cheeses. Anything like heavily creamy though, not so much.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do sour cream. If I have like just a dollop,
You're
I'm
screwed.
screwed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Night's over.
Probably something like the lactose.
Yeah. So like I've been doing like oat milk and stuff like that, which has been, helpful for sure.
But boring.
Yeah. I mean, I use it for my protein shakes essentially.
Fair
like it's been a sad life without chocolate milk. I gotta say that much.
Yeah.
Like,
Unfortunately, at least you're lucky that you're able to eliminate it with something simple like just dietary restrictions.
Yeah.
Because, I'm on the unlucky side of things. So I've had the same problem. I've had gut issues my whole life. And again, especially when you're overweight, you can attribute a lot of that stuff to gut health. But
yeah.
I have done elimination diets, and I have done, everything that you can imagine to try to help it from a natural standpoint. And unfortunately, none of that stuff works. I can cut out everything for
Really?
Yeah, no.
So what helps you then?
Meds.
Meds? Okay.
Drugs are great.
Yeah.
There's certain things that just need to be medicated. Yeah, and it works for me. It's all I really needed. But I've eliminated milk for I think the longest I went was 4 months without any sort of dairy. I went a really long time without gluten. It helped my breathing.
Really?
It helped congestion. It didn't help my guts. No.
Yeah,
So-
that's the thing. Like, if you go to like all the lengths and like an elimination diet, like you were talking, and just try to do whatever.
Sometimes
you can.
the answer is medical. Like,
Well,
I mean,
that's
you
just
can
it, man.
attribute a lot of things to gut health, but sometimes you're just fucked.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have a problem that you need to have medicine for, right?
Yeah, I had to come to that conclusion earlier this year
It's
myself.
like your ADHD, right?
Yeah, like
So
I
what's
tried.
the point of your podcast? You're talking about stuff because you have this like massive deficit dump, right?
Yeah, exactly. And,
Sometimes you need meds.
well, that's exactly what it came to for me. Like I tried. I am like a staunch opposition to the pharmaceutical companies in the
Right.
first place. So I tried to do. They say like all you got to do is like you exercise enough.
Sure.
You do certain things that'll
Yeah.
help that dopamine
That work?
response to kick off. Thing is, couldn't initiate it.
No.
Yeah, exactly. So
Not a
eventually,
chance.
after
Good
going
luck
to
with that.
therapist for a year, went to a psychiatrist. He's like, here.
Oh, you need to do
Vyvanse.
cognitive behavioral
Yeah.
therapy. Oh,
Yeah.
try Vyvanse.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's
Had
some.
I known, I would have done way better in school.
Oh, I know. It's like it's crazy. Like it literally within like a week of starting on like the small dose, I was like actually just doing the thing.
I
you
turned
know?
39 here in 2 days. I didn't find out until I was 37
Fucking look
that
at
I
you
had a
over-
medical.
Man, you
condition.
could pass for 28. I bet you could get into like some of them.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah?
That
Good.
makes me so happy.
Keep it with you. I want you to take that as a treat.
I appreciate it.
I don't have any physical merchandise.
Right, I don't
but
get paid to do this, but
Yeah.
that one,
Yeah. There we
that'll
go.
stick with me. That's perfect. I
we,
like it.
we pay in self-esteem. That's how it goes. Yeah.
Oh, that's a good way to do it, man. We could all use a little bit more of that. I
Right? If only money wasn't so important.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sad reality of every industry, I think.
Yeah. So how would you approach somebody who's like coming into your gym and is saying like there's these certain things that I need to correct and like I'm having these issues, and you find out that there are like digestive issues they're experiencing and stuff. Have you ever had to like softly nudge someone into maybe seeing a doctor about getting on a medication
100%.
for it?
Yeah, 100%. There's certain things in the industry that, well, actually, I can take a step back. So I have never lost a client because I've referred out.
Mm.
I don't know if you're a young trainer, if you're somebody new to the industry or a therapist or whatever it happens to be, if you're worried about somebody else poaching your members, your clients, your potential prospects because you don't have the answer to something and you need to refer out, that is not a negative. I've never lost somebody for that reason. If anything, it tells them that you're confident in the fact that you have somebody else to help them because all they care about is that they're going to get better.
Yeah.
So if you send a new client to say, hey, this is way outside my wheelhouse, man, because again, in Canada in particular, most of the professions are fairly well protected. Like dietitians work with doctors. So nutritionists are kind of this nasty gray zone. So is personal training, unfortunately.
So what is the difference? If you don't mind me like going on a tangent here, dietitian versus a nutritionist, what would that?
Dietitian is regulated.
That's it.
Yeah, it's the big one. So a dietetics degree is specific from university. It is a science degree. You do pass board exams as a registered dietitian.
Okay.
They have a certain amount of leeway to make medical decisions when it comes to food. And a lot of times they end up working in the medical community. So they work at hospitals and they work with doctors and they work with things like that. The really good ones will kind of parlay that into sports performance because you can kind of do that as another step up. It's not to the best of my knowledge, it's not a general component of their learning. I'm sure they talk about athletics.
Yeah.
But then you can get sports dietitians that are, really, really focused on that side of things. A nutritionist is somebody that understands nutrition that's done some sort of education. It's not regulated. And so to the best of my knowledge, even from an insurance standpoint, I'm not convinced that most of them have insurance.
Okay.
So nutritionists, the difference is a dietitian can give you like essentially a prescription. Like you need to eat these things to fix this problem.
Yeah, I'm prescribing you kale for a week.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
But a nutritionist can give advice.
Okay.
And any nutritionist that claims to treat a problem, oh yeah, we can fix your IBS. I know how to treat that problem. No, you don't. You're a nutritionist. You can give advice.
Okay.
People are not obligated to follow it, right? And obviously, if they're paying you and you choose to, that's fine.
Right.
But it's not regulated. And unfortunately, that's done a lot of damage to the industry too. On the bodybuilding side of things in particular.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that on Instagram. Like,
yeah, I mean, it's really unfortunate, man. The physique industry is already really fucked up, mentally. I mean, you're dealing with people that obviously have body image issues a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Either too big, too small, or whatever got them into it in the
Dysmorphia
first
of
place.
all
Sure,
sorts, yeah.
whatever got them into it in the first place. And then structured eating can very, very easily lead to disordered eating. So you were a wrestler. What weight class did you wrestle at?
I think 56 kilo.
Okay. And what did you walk at?
Well, there wasn't a lot of cutting.
Yeah, in high school, probably not.
Back
right?
then, but there was still at walking around about the same. I mean, I was
scratch
lean
weight.
in high
Sure.
school.
Yeah.
Right? There's a lot of it wasn't just wrestling.
But how neurotic did you have to be with your food to make sure that you stayed at the same weight? Or were you just lucky to be one of the guys when you were younger that was skinny?
I was lucky that way.
So
when I was younger, I was a pretty chubby kid. I actually did have some body weight issues, but after grade
Wrestling
9,
killed it.
well, wrestling, football, and rugby. I also did taekwondo for 6 years too, so it's like all that stuff. I got lucky that way, but I know a lot of people in my friend group who have struggled with that exact premise for a long time.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like I deal with a lot of the food from my fighters and my wrestlers. My wrestlers not so much. Wrestling Canada has dietitians on staff and they deal with most of those guys. But my fighters, on the other hand, a lot of these guys come from a wrestling background or some sport where they're required to maintain a certain level of body weight.
Yeah,
and because nobody's teaching proper food habits or food hygiene, whatever you want to call it, you get these guys that are consuming so little food and their outputs are so high and they wonder why they're sick or they get hurt or they just don't understand it. And that focus and that kind of obsession with maintaining a body weight leads to disordered eating.
Yeah.
Suddenly these guys are, I can't consume carbs because they'll make me fat. Well, yeah, because you've had no carbs for the last 2 years and suddenly when you're trying to fuel yourself, you gain 6 pounds overnight. Well, yeah, it's not fat. You just filled out finally, right? You're actually properly fueled. So a large portion of what I do with athletes is breaking bad habits for nutrition. I would have guys that are fight at 135 pounds that walk at 165, which is a whole other ballgame. But, that would be consuming something like, 1,800 calories a day. Well,
That's nothing, right?
no, like
Yeah.
you wrestled. How many calories do you think you burn in a wrestling practice? 800, 1,000?
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, jujitsu, I've worn my heart rate monitor when I'm on the mats before, and my lightest day is 700 calories in an hour. You know,
Holy
I'm a big guy, so that
Yeah.
helps. But man, if you're a decent athlete and you train 2, 3, or 4 times a day, you might burn 1,500 to 2,000
Yeah.
calories.
Calories is fuel. You need
You
that,
have,
right?
you have to have it.
Mhm.
So I had guys that were probably consuming less than they were burning in activity, never mind what their base rate was. And they
Wow.
were wondering why they were slow and sleep sucked. And yeah, so it's a huge problem. Disordered eating is a major issue.
Yeah, it's especially nowadays with like the onset of social media and stuff. You see it a lot in like teenagers
Sure.
and in like the high school world too.
Man,
It's-
I would not want to be a teenager now.
oh man,
With
The-
social media? Oof.
yeah, I think I graduated.
There's shit that we did that I'm so glad nobody had a camera for.
Oh, big time. And like, let alone like, even with
Like
like,
I would have gotten so much more trouble.
yeah, and even
Mom,
with
don't
like
listen to
the
that.
messenger apps and stuff, like you go home and the bullying doesn't stop.
Right. And
you
I mean,
know?
I was a fat kid. I was bullied. Right?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, the hockey guys, I've hated hockey for years because of that.
I never played it. I never understood. I never understood the guys who played it either. It was.
I got my revenge though. That
Yeah?
internship that I talked about was all hockey players.
oh, nice.
So I got to be the trainer and
There you go.
kick their
Yeah.
butt on a regular basis.
Cool.
So
Cool.
that was my trauma. I fixed that.
On top of like, I guess since we're on the topic of like somewhat negative effects of certain societal standards and stuff. What's your take on the whole like man up thing with like young guys in sports? Because I know like when I was in football, there are times when I would wake up on the grass and just run back to the huddle when instead I should have probably gone and sat down, right?
You mean like the machismo side of things?
Yeah,
like you're
like-
not hurt, walk it off, rub
Well,
some dirt on it stuff?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of that, at least in my experience, in the world of like physical sports, which is, you know, a certain amount is probably necessary, right? But
Yeah. So again, interestingly enough, because I deal with guys that block punches with their face. I mean, the good ones tend not to, but
yeah,
a
Look at
lot
that
of
block.
a
What
lot
a
of them
solid
do.
block
Wow,
with the
just-
lower chin.
Yeah,
Yeah.
duck your head into it. That's great. You know, the problem with that whole man up idea is there's no replacement policy on body parts. So when things start to get damaged, you know, that wear and tear, you know, there's nowhere for it to go. It just adds up. Most of your body, like humans are really adaptable.
Mhm.
We can survive a huge amount of, my friend is a great example, but humans can survive a huge amount of punishment. I think the thing that still isn't talked about enough, I mean, it's way better, but it's not talked about enough, is brain trauma,
Yeah,
head
the
injuries,
CTE.
TBI stuff. Yeah. Because, you know, again, I have guys that don't get hurt badly. You know, they'll get kind of like, you know, a little wobbled in practice or something like
Yeah.
that. Wobbled can be a concussion.
Oh yeah,
You know, you don't have to go out to be concussed. You don't have to, you know, forget which day it is.
yeah. Something moved your head fast enough for your brain to hit the wall. You
Right.
know, it's like,
yeah. And, you know, angular stuff is even worse. So, you know, something like that stupid slap fighting shit that they've got now.
Oh
like,
my God,
super entertaining to watch. It's rotational force. It's going sideways.
Yeah.
It's so much worse for you than taking something head
People
on.
seem to think that because it's an open hand, it's like less harmful to your brain, and that makes no sense at all.
If anybody listens to this, Boss Rutan is one of the he's a, you know, Hall of Famer in the UFC. He's
Boss,
one of the
yeah.
greatest martial artists of all
A
time.
brutal man. too,
Yeah,
right?
he's a brutal man.
Yeah.
You know, in pancration, when he used to fight in Japan, they didn't allow closed-handed strikes, right? You had to hit with the palm heel.
Yeah, palm strikes.
Yeah,
like
palm
in
strikes. And
Taekwondo
he
stuff.
still advocates for the palm strike over the fist because you don't break your fingers. It
Yeah.
hits just as hard. You don't get hurt. So, no, the
That's
open-handed
good.
slap
No.
hitting with a massive bony protrusion, like, no, it's still going to hurt like crazy. That's
Oh,
a
yeah.
huge amount of force. And those guys aren't like bitch slapping each other.
No.
Have you seen this, like throwing a discus?
Yeah, they let them
It's a
stand there,
wind-up.
straight arm and wind up, like, and they even let them rehearse it like a golf swing.
Oh, I know.
first.
It's insane.
It's just that's wild.
Every
like,
one of those guys is going to have early onset Alzheimer's. I guarantee it.
yeah, Dana White's like huge into that too.
Because
eh?
it's money.
yeah, it is big money.
Say what you want about Dana White. The guy has an ability to print money like nobody I've ever seen.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, he made the UFC, right? Like he is the reason.
Yeah, it's
it all
super
good
impressive.
there.
But it just goes back to the same thing. Like UFC, the one advantage that mixed martial arts seems to have in competition, and I say that specifically because I know and work with enough fighters to see what happens in training.
Mhm.
If you have a good coach, so shout out to the guys that I've worked with here at, you know, WKX and TriStar and a few of the other places. Their coaches really do give a shit. When people go down or when they take a hard hit, like, you don't keep training that day.
Yeah.
You're done now. Okay, you got tagged, you went out, you're off the mat.
Yeah, I know
You got wobbled, you're off the mat. You're not sparring anymore. You're done for at least the day. That's maybe not enough, but man, it's a start. But like I remember ramming my head in rugby or football. I got ear hold and
Oh yeah.
you
Call
you
them
got to keep
stingers,
playing.
right?
Yeah, you got a stinger.
Everything
man,
goes
my neck's fucked
numb.
up.
You wake up on the ground and then oh.
Oh, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Man, like TBI stuff, you can't mess around with that. And post-concussion syndrome can last for months. I have one of my fighters who's a staff member of mine. He took a hard hit, a knee. He was out, not, totally out, but enough that he fell down and, had to get helped back up again. He had post-concussion syndrome I think he's still dealing with some of that. And that was probably 9 months ago. One good hard hit.
Yep.
Right.
And that's all it takes,
Yeah, don't mess around with that stuff. Brain injuries are no joke.
Yeah. What about with the other, I wasn't allowed to play in my final football game because the game prior to that, I started getting rabbit foot. I found out I had this gnarly tendonitis in my shins. Okay. And my feet just wouldn't work anymore. I was trying to get up and run, and it was like a deer had been shot in the back. It just can't get up and move. And my coach wouldn't let me play in my last game because he said I wasn't man enough to deal with the injury that I had. And I was like, I literally put myself to the point where my legs weren't working anymore.
Was the coach doing it to protect you because he was worried you were getting hurt, or was he doing it because he didn't think you had it in you to keep playing?
My doctor gave me the clear to play that game.
Yeah. See, I mean, I've said this before, certain coaches in particular take their own frustrations out on their players.
Yeah.
Like you don't have an injury problem, you don't have a training problem, you have an asshole problem.
Yeah.
I think, there's always going to be those guys that are kind of dinosaurs in the industry that still believe that stuff, right? Puke buckets and weight rooms and crap like that.
Yeah.
But
we're not training for the Navy SEAls. We're just trying to play a game.
like it's high school football, man.
Yeah.
Fuck off.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think that's a big part of it, right? Like even amateur MMA, because I deal with a lot of those guys, there's, I have guys that cut a fairly significant amount of weight, but we've gotten it down to the point now where we're pretty safe about it, and we make game time decisions as to whether or not we're going to continue or, any of those kind of things. And, my process is fairly well dialed. These guys don't have problems anymore. Before I started helping out, lots of them had been to the hospital with seizures and cramping and massive dehydration problems. So that we don't have that problem anymore.
Brutal, man.
It's scary stuff. It can be. But, my point is that when you're an amateur athlete, why are you putting yourself through that process? The sport's already hard enough. You're getting punched in the face with a 5-ounce glove. Yeah. That sucks.
Yeah.
That's not fun.
Getting hit
it is for those guys, but
yeah.
That's not fun.
Yeah.
And cutting that much weight is already a nightmare process. It is kind of a rite of passage. You want your opponent to go through the same thing as you. But the reality is they put so much pressure on them to make sure that they do make weight. And as an amateur, why? It doesn't matter for anything. You're just there to get fight experience. You missed weight by 2 pounds. Well, I can tell you right now, 2 pounds is not catastrophic when it comes to how well they're going to perform in the ring. And if they're dehydrated, it's going to be even worse. So, I don't know, let them fight. Don't have people cut 40 pounds, but you just get these guys that want to do too much when they're too young. And so, we try to minimize some of the potential damage.
How long do they usually have to cut as far as the window goes? What's the longest to shortest times that you've seen?
Well, most of these guys know that they're fighting for about 8 weeks. Like the average fight camp is between 7 to 11 weeks long. The longer you have, the better, because you can slowly whittle them down.
Yeah.
As a bit of a prep work to how fast can you do it, it largely depends on how much work you do prior. So if you're smart and you're lucky, you can build these guys up to the point where they're consuming massive amounts of food, 3,500, 4,000 calories a day in camp. And then all of a sudden, when you drop them to 3,500 calories, they start losing weight, which is twice as much food as they were eating before. So you can get them to be pretty lean. We've done that with a few guys now where they walk probably, I'm going to say about 20 pounds over fight weight a week out. And then in the span of about 6 or 7 days, we usually get them down about 18 pounds. The most I've seen is 22.
Holy shit.
And I have 2 guys that hold water like a sponge. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. So one of them fights at 135 pounds, and 24 hours out, I think he was 153.
Wow. That's crazy. I think
That's outside what's normally considered safe.
yeah,
Just
absolutely.
for the record, like that's not a good idea.
No.
But we know him and we know his body, and
Yeah.
he can do it with absolutely no problem. Like he doesn't feel tired. He doesn't have heart rate issues. His blood pressure's normal. He just carries water like a sponge. It's
crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. But most guys, we try to keep them at about 8% of their body weight. We try to cut within 24 hours. So if you fight at 155 pounds, you can cut 13 pounds, something like that.
I could see that. I mean, like water weight is a thing, right? That's
You can do more. I'm not saying you ought
yeah,
to.
you probably shouldn't, but you can.
But you get guys cutting 30 pounds as amateurs.
Yeah, and
right?
that's like there's no money on the line. It's not
Why?
your lifestyle. It's
Why?
not-
That's
yeah,
dumb.
Yeah,
That's really dumb. You're doing potentially irreparable harm to your body, and
like
for what? For an amateur fight.
some people like to say, like, just play devil's advocate. Like, I did it so that I knew I could.
Okay, sure. There's still some benefit to knowing how hard you can push yourself. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do
Fine.
hard things.
Yeah,
but try to do hard things that aren't necessarily like
starving yourself.
putting your health at risk.
yeah.
Like go do hard hikes. Go, that kind of stuff. Don't dehydrate yourself to the point where you need to be hospitalized with
and then
an
go
IV.
get the shit beat out of you. afterwards.
Yeah, well, and at least those guys, if they go to the hospital, at least they don't let them fight generally. But but
True.
sometimes they do.
Yeah. Fuck, I think I might be one of those guys who like holds the water a lot. Like when I first met you at TriStar there, I was on the start of like a weight loss journey thing because I'd weighed myself over the holidays. Before that, I was 196 pounds.
Sure.
And like at 5 foot fuck all, that's a lot of weight, right? So I was like,
It's a little thick.
Yeah, I can't be turning 30 on the wrong side of 200. I want to like heart disease and diabetes are fairly common things in English and German families.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I was like, I gotta get off this, and like I think I was in it for about 3 weeks when I saw you, and I was already down 12 pounds, and then I got myself down to 165 by
Good for you.
April, I think, maybe.
Oh
earlier
wow,
than
30
that
pounds,
even.
great.
Yeah. But the first 15 were gone in like 2 weeks.
It's if you can get somebody to commit to starting a program.
Yeah.
If you do it right, usually it's fairly easy to stay motivated because stuff starts to move pretty quickly, right? There's a lot of things that happen fairly fast. Now, if you're really unlucky, that's not true. But if you could show a graph, man, weight loss is not linear. I think the hardest part about it is people go, well, I lost 15 pounds and I gained 7. Yeah, it can happen that way too. You just have to stick to the process. Your body's doing all sorts of shit while you're trying to lose weight.
Yeah.
So you can't be married to that linear process. That's what the habit that I developed when I was a teenager. I would step on the scale every single morning, and if I didn't see weight loss every day, I'd reduce my food again.
Oh, dude, that's brutal. Yeah, we don't have a scale.
I
anywhere
lost like 130 pounds in 6 months. Yeah, don't do that either. That's
No.
really fucking stupid.
Yeah, it sounds like a tough time. Did you have a lot of excess skin and stuff going on?
I still do. I should have had stock and hydroxycut.
Stock and hydroxycut.
Yeah.
Oh, like
the
bone
fat
broth?
burner brands. Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I see.
fat burner brands. Like.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I should have, because I went through them. I went through like a bottle of fat burners a week.
Holy.
Like I think at this point in time I'm immune to caffeine and ephedrine. Like I could probably do it right now and have a nap. It wouldn't affect me. Yeah, it was scary, man. Like I don't know what I did to my heart.
So Red Bull's just like water to you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, coffee
Wow.
before bed, no problem.
Holy shit.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I'm sure Andrew Huberman probably has an answer for how
Oh, yeah.
fucked up my adrenals are, but
Probably.
yeah, it's scary, man. You can do really, really dumb things when you're motivated the wrong way.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, in fact, that's kind of the basis of eating disorders as they are, right? Like,
Yeah.
and not just like eating
And you're
disorders, but,
never
like,
happy.
Yeah. No, and that's
you're never happy.
when you're hungry all the time, you don't get that boost in your head
No.
that you get from like being properly fed.
Man, I had ADD undiagnosed, and I was underfed. How well do you think I did my last couple of years of high school?
Oh fuck yeah.
My grades were not stellar. Like, thank God for final exams because I was able to write and do really, really well when they had them. Did you guys have that? Maybe you're a little too young. Did they still have like departmentals, like province-wide exams?
Yeah, well, when I was in high school, they did.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still have. Apparently, it's like
It's not really a thing anymore.
well, because they like. I don't know what took them so long to realize that like not everybody processes information the same way, and you shouldn't judge someone.
Totally true, but thank God they did when I was going through school because those are the only things that brought my marks up enough to get to university.
Oh, come to think of it, that's same here, man. Like I got
They saved my bacon so badly.
yeah, yeah, big time actually. I remember the only reason I graduated was I did I did my lifeguarding program.
Yeah.
That
And
got
got
me
credit for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they gave me they said I needed my grade 12 English, and I was like, cool. And I took one block in my second semester to study for that, and then like do the exam in April. The rest of my blocks, all other 7, was human performance weightlifting.
Nice.
It was called Superfit, which was like essentially CrossFit / triathlon training
You
thing.
did this in high school?
Yeah.
Man,
So
your high school kicked ass.
it was it was a small school, but we had pretty, decent enough facilities.
Yeah.
It was like big weight room in the mezzanine and all that stuff. So I'd be doing weightlifting and triathlon training, and then I was a teacher's assistant in another gym class, and then I had guitar, and that was like
Guitar is a class.
yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And then the next semester, same 3 things, but with an English thing going instead, and I graduated early with extra credits.
Well, that's not bad either.
Yeah, and I aced the English exam, and because I challenged it with no prior thing, it averaged out to 84%. So it was 2% away from an 8. The highest grade I'd ever gotten in an academic course. And I only had to take one test. It was like...
I didn't start doing that well until I got to university and found stuff I liked.
Yeah,
High school was tough.
Nice.
I didn't like high school.
I wanted to go to university. I never really got around to it. More or less just like... I'm from a blue-collar family.
Right.
I wanted to be a biologist when I was younger.
Nice.
To be, like marine biologist. Obsessed. Still
I did
am
too,
with
actually.
like ocean life and sharks and all that stuff, right? I wanted to go into like a specialty of non-vertebrates and octopi and stuff like that. But
Sweet.
Or cephalopods. And every time the mom would be like, you're not going to make any money doing that. Like, we're not putting your college fund towards something where you're not going to make money back off. And I was like, well, then what do you want me to do? And first thing she'd tell me is to go get a class 1 trucker license. And I was like, yeah, I mean,
You're not wrong.
yeah, I could. You're not wrong, but we're talking about like nutrition and eating disorders and stuff right now. You want to like fucking fast lane to that kind of world.
Oh, man.
Just hop
You're
behind
not
a
kidding.
Peterbilt and drive across the country. You're going to see beautiful things, but you're going to eat so
much
many
crap.
different cheeseburgers that are all the same McDonald's cheeseburger.
You'll look like a cheeseburger.
Oh,
when we're done.
exactly. Yeah. So I got lucky to get out of that, but I never ended up going to university, which kind of sucked.
So she was worried about money, and then you got into film. That was a good idea.
Yeah, well, actually, funny enough, I had 22 different jobs before I got into film.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I did.
I think that's the prerequisite. Like, that's what they look
Right?
for in your resume
Yeah.
before film. Like, have you done everything else?
Yeah.
Great. Now you're ready for film.
Where else have you found yourself fitting in? Nowhere. We've
Film.
got you. Yeah,
Perfect.
exactly. Yeah, the land of misfits, man. Yeah, no, I did like trades and moving work and stuff like that, and like sales, all kinds of stuff back then. But like, even when I was a carpenter, it was like I just couldn't get it. I just wasn't happy. And then I was like, man, I miss university. I could have been on like a university wrestling team or something like that. But honestly, like, I'm also crazy afraid of debt. So that might.
That's probably good.
Yeah.
That's probably good.
It's probably a helpful thing as far as that goes.
I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. How many of these clients of yours have you seen come in with these eating issues, and like you've seen them kind of progress to like a healthier standard with it? Like,
My fighters are largely successful.
Mm.
I probably only have 1 or 2 that I continue to struggle with. They just have these deep-seated doubts about food.
Mm.
They just don't understand. To the best of my abilities, they still just don't understand how to eat. It's interesting. I guess people have these wild misconceptions about how much food they're actually taking in, on the plus side of things and on the negative. People that have a tendency to be overweight generally don't understand how much food they're actually taking in, right? Like serving sizes are totally disproportionate to what they think that they are.
Yeah, the IHOP size.
Yeah. Right, exactly, right? Like one serving of pasta is like 3 forkfuls, right?
Yeah,
Like, it's not a bowl.
Here's an omelet the size of a sockeye salmon with 5 pancakes stacked
On
to
top
go
of it,
with
yeah. It's like it's a 1,500 calorie meal. Well,
Yeah.
it said it's only 700.
Yeah. This would feed a family in
Right.
any other country,
Right.
but I'm
Except
supposed to eat
here.
this to myself? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
But then fighters and wrestlers, anybody that's in sports where, you have a weight class issue, or, interestingly enough, because I dealt with volleyball players for so long, particularly female volleyball players, like the uniform is spandex shorts.
Yeah.
And you don't think, regardless of how physically impressive these girls are, because trust me, they're absolute
super athletes.
Yeah, they're incredible.
Volleyball's hardcore. Like,
I
people don't understand.
never played it a day in my life, and I love the sport
My
because
dad was
these girls are they're kick-ass.
My dad was Junior Olympics Team Canada for men's volleyball back in like the 70s, I guess.
Really?
Yeah.
And you came up 5 feet.
Yeah, he is 5 feet. Yeah. Oh,
No
yeah.
way.
Yeah, he was.
Even
He was
better.
the barrow. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
See, that's a great position too. They're so mobile.
Yeah.
So fast. I have two of the athletes that I still work with were liberos.
Yeah.
And now play in professional beach.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah.
Man, that's tough. Fucking beach volleyball.
Beach volleyball's gnarly
that
too.
sand, it's just like it takes away so much.
It does.
Like,
it's a whole different sport.
Yeah.
It's really fun. Really fun to work with them too. They're great athletes. So, but again, volleyball players. So part of as impressive as they are, they still have this physical component because they have to look somewhat okay, you'd hope.
Yeah.
In spandex shorts, that's what they think. They don't. It gets
in
the way.
Like, why don't they just give him basketball shorts?
I don't know. That's not my decision to make.
Yeah.
I have no idea what color. Now, I mean, I have spoken to some of them, and they do like playing in the spandex because it doesn't bunch up and it doesn't move all over the place. And okay.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
I mean, to a certain extent, okay, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
However, you are on a certain amount of display, so there's got to be some level of self-criticism there, for lack of a way to put it. Like, it's got to make you worried.
I mean, you and I are both probably fully aware of that, having to wear a singlet in front of hundreds of people.
I mean, I was
in a nice cold gym.
I was lucky enough that I didn't make it. So I wrestled, but I didn't wrestle well enough to have to get to the singlet point. I still was able to wrestle in shorts and shirtless.
Oh man, I was the singlet from like grade 8 on, and it was the most difficult thing to deal with as far as self-esteem goes.
I have a great story for you if nobody else is. Like, it's a little inappropriate, but it's pretty entertaining.
It's fine. Yeah,
I remember distinctly sitting in the weight room at university when I was the strength coach, and I had the wrestling regionals streaming because we had a bunch of guys competing.
Cool.
And so I had it on my laptop while we were running one of our sessions. And so it was a fairly small session. I think it was towards the end of the year, kind of exam time. So, our teams that weren't in season were kind of chopped up. They weren't full sessions. So one of the volleyball groups that I was working with, I think probably only had 6 or 7 athletes in. So it was a pretty quiet session. It wasn't exactly a balls to the wall kind of kick the crap out of them. So in between sets of doing things, we'd come over because 2 of the girls ended up having boyfriends that were wrestlers.
Okay.
So I don't know if you've ever seen wrestling live streamed at a university level, but the camera is on the judging table, right? It's on the scorekeeper's table.
Okay.
So it's about waist height. So if you can see where this is going, there was a call that was made and the wrestler walked over and stood right in front of the judging table.
Oh.
And so the comment that was made was, see, this is why you date wrestlers. You know exactly what you're going to get.
Just here's a nice spandex covered hog. Just
exactly. You absolutely have nothing to hide.
Yeah. Well, it used to be done naked, right? Back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyhow, get off of a tangent here. You're saying the volleyball players.
Yeah, sorry. So, I mean, I've dealt with eating disorders on both sides of things, right? Both from a performance standpoint and from an aesthetic side of things, where they get worried about, man, I don't want to look this way, and I don't feel like I don't look good in these things, and so, then you have people that. Then they develop disordered eating, and they don't eat well, and then they don't perform well, and then they don't perform well in school, and it's this terrible, terrible downhill slope that wrecks huge amounts of their lives. And in a large part of it, I mean, I've known great volleyball players that didn't really recover. I've known great wrestlers that didn't really recover.
Yeah,
that had to go into other things. Luckily some of them were able to get some help. One wrestler of mine that I hold very near and dear ended up working with another nutritionist, but she was consuming something like 800 calories a day for weeks on end. Like, toddlers need more than that.
Whoa.
And you're talking about like NCAA level, like national caliber wrestler.
Wild.
Yeah.
NCAA.
Yeah, and that's how afraid of food they are.
That's a shame.
Because they're so worried about weight classes or how they look that they don't take into account the performance aspect, and don't understand that you don't need to starve yourself to still maintain the same weight. You just have to understand what the balance is. But there's no education for it, right? You're reading stuff online, and you're just trying things, right? And you get scared. You don't understand body fluctuation and physiology. So it's nerve-wracking.
And it's also like, it's hard to figure out on your own too, like how your body reacts to certain routines and foods, With the topic of nutrition and stuff, I was actually interested in this particularly because I've been trying to put on a little more size myself. Sure. I got like a creatine going on. I'm doing roughly 80 grams of protein a day, give or take. I'm not sure what my calorie count is. I don't really do the counting calories thing anyhow. But like, if you were like, how big of a role does carbohydrates play in that? Because obviously you need some carbs, right? And like, um, if you're trying to cut, are you also supposed to remove the calories? So like, I guess it's like kind of a multifaceted question. But what would you tell someone who's trying to get bigger and also gain more muscle mass out of that? Like, like I guess
the
tone or
the
whatever.
old school kind of bodybuilder methodology was dirty bulking, right? You just eat like a demon
Yeah,
and pour as much calories into you as possible while you're training. I'm not. I don't love that approach,
yeah,
primarily because body. We talked earlier about inflammatory,
yeah.
bowel disease, but inflammation in general, the thing that causes more of that than anything else is being over fat.
Mm-hmm.
And having been there, I can tell you absolutely that when you're overweight, you are way unhealthier.
Yeah.
End of story. You just have more health problems that are likely to pop up. So when you're looking at gaining weight, the whole world revolves around the physics of thermodynamics. You can't escape the basic laws of you have to consume more than you're burning in order to gain weight.
Yeah.
And if you're going the opposite way, you have to burn more than you're consuming. End of story. A lot of things play into that. Okay, gut health, hormones, all these other things that, become hot topics on social media,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't escape the basics.
Yeah.
So usually when you look at the math, you kind of take your baseline calories that you're consuming right now, or that your body needs rather, and then you can take what you're consuming, and as long as those are pretty much bang on even, then you increase by about 250 to 500 calories a day. That's it. That's all that's really required to build muscle. You
Okay.
don't need to be 1,000 calories in a surplus to build muscle mass, unless you're doing more, right?
Yeah.
So it comes down to you need to be consuming more than your base rate and your exercise.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've decided, okay, I'm going to put on muscle mass, but you're also a compulsive runner,
Yeah.
like, okay, that's going to be a little bit more challenging because you're doing something that's going to make it hard to gain muscle mass and you're burning a lot of extra calories. So maybe you need to be consuming 3,500 calories, not 3,000 or 2,500.
The running part actually got me there. So like when you go to the gym, right? Obviously you need to warm up somehow, right?
Yep.
So you do like 10. I usually do 10 to 50 on the treadmill or
Sure.
elliptical, right? Whereabouts do you want to cut that off if you're trying to stop the negative effects of like weight loss happening, like getting in the way of you?
I think that's largely inconsequential. Like, how many calories are you burning in 10 to 15 minutes of running?
Probably
Have you
not
measured
much.
it? Not, yeah, it's not a huge amount.
I think I used to do 20 to 25, and I was burning something like 250 to 300 calories.
Yeah, on the treadmill though,
Yeah.
not based on the numbers that the treadmill's spitting out, not
Yeah.
based on what you've seen.
Yeah, exactly.
Like to give you an idea, if you do a minute of burpees, which
Yeah.
is hell on earth,
Oh god.
it's like 15 calories.
Yeah, and that's not much for the amount
It's
you
not
put
much
in.
for the amount
Yeah.
you're putting in, right? So your body does a better job of burning calories just being yourself
Yeah.
than you do with exercise. You got to be pushing pretty hard. Like I said, an hour of jujitsu burns, pick a number, 500, 700 calories.
Yeah.
So, your 15 minutes on the treadmill might be burning 100 calories.
How many, like, do you work with any bodybuilders as well? Or
I have.
Yeah?
I have in the past. I don't anymore. I have colleagues that do. But if we kind of continue on that vein of your question, the cardio that you're doing to warm up,
Mhm.
I wouldn't even worry about that. It's extra calories. Like,
Yeah.
does it matter? Yes, because you're going to burn 50 to 100 more calories. You need to eat more food. Is that going to prevent you from gaining weight? Probably not. That's kind of in that gray zone of
Yeah.
excess.
And it doesn't necessarily stop your muscles from growing. either,
No,
right?
that's been largely disproven. You can
Yeah.
there's a small interference effect that happens from a performance standpoint.
Mhm.
So, you have to be a little bit careful if you're dealing with athletes, when you do long, slow duration cardio and when you're doing strength training, particularly power training, they can interfere with each other.
Yeah.
So you have to separate them or design them in such a way that you don't get that interference effect. For most bodybuilding, that's not really an issue. Again, the cardio that most bodybuilders do isn't going to impact their growth. In fact, there's some research now that's showing that, the more aerobically capable you are, so the better your heart health is, the more you can grow because you can recover faster. You have better
Yeah.
blood flow to the muscles. You feed them with more nutrients when they're, when you're actually working. It's beneficial to have positive cardiovascular adaptations while you're trying to gain muscle mass. For you,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
only thing that I would say is you probably need more protein.
Yeah.
As a general rule, most people don't consume a whole lot.
Yeah. I heard it was supposed to be like a gram to every kilogram you weigh or something.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it starts. At the bottom end, you want roughly 1 gram per kilo. When you get into the weight loss side of things, we typically go more around that 2 grams per kilo or 1 gram per pound.
Okay.
Is a pretty easy place
Yeah.
to be. Even for bodybuilders, realistically, I'm still a bigger fan of higher protein.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's generally a little bit more beneficial, but it makes things a little bit easier. The caveat to that is carbohydrate is largely protein sparing. So to put that more simply, if you're going to consume on the lower end of the protein spectrum to gain weight,
Mm-hmm.
you probably just need to eat more carbs
Okay.
so that your body doesn't need the protein for anything other than
Muscle repair.
muscle repair. Yeah.
Okay.
There's still going to be some that bleeds off and does other things because protein's fairly useful, obviously. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you consume more carbohydrate, it'll do more things and you won't need quite as much
Yeah.
protein. But, still, why do yourself the disservice? Get more protein into you.
Yeah. I definitely noticed that, like, when I started that whole weight loss thing earlier this year, it was the first time I'd paid attention to my nutrition since I was like, in high school, probably. Like, my 20s were just a fucking write-off. Right? Just like coming home, 6-pack of beer,
Yeah,
eat whatever, it doesn't fucking matter. But once I started, like, I got myself a good protein isolate, yada yada, started eating like just meat and veg, and my carbs would be like one meal throughout that day would be like a carb heavy meal, right? But the amount of like noticeable change I had in my day-to-day mood, energy, and just basically every facet of my life was like substantially increased from like just, I'm assuming it was because I was eating so much protein. It's like
just getting healthy in general.
yeah.
Right,
Well,
is
yeah,
gonna
I
be
was
better.
I was definitely keeping more track of like my veggies and stuff at that point, right? But
Yeah.
it was
There's this kind of recent trend where, vegetables are vilified, right? Like they cause gut problems, or they're trying to kill you, or Liver King says that you don't need them as long as you eat raw liver.
and take, $30,000 worth of steroids every month.
Yeah. Like the fact that people didn't see that one coming. Anyway.
Yeah.
Really? You think he's natural? Shut
You can read it in the veins on his bicep.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. It says trenbolone across his chest. No, it's actually the raw testicles.
yeah, that's it. That's where he gets it from, right?
Man, unfortunately, people are just so willing to believe that, you can do things more easily. If vegetables are going to be the thing that is actually going to kill you, I mean, if they're really that evil, they're doing a damn terrible job of it. Like every single study that I've ever seen, and I think there was a big one that was just released, like longevity increases proportionately to vegetable intake.
Yeah.
Like all the other things, it causes these things, and there's lignans, and other these little polyphenol
Maybe some
things
of them don't agree with you,
yeah,
but like
but in the long term, the
Yeah.
more vegetables you eat, the healthier you are.
Yeah.
Pretty much in a linear fashion. Like I'm not sure it cuts off very very far, right? Like
Yeah.
you can go a long way eating a lot of vegetables and get better. So realistically, like a plant-based diet where you consume a lot of fruits and vegetables is probably your best bet. I think when you add good quality protein to it and then enough snack food that you enjoy to make yourself not lose your mind is probably your best overall option, and then aim for that, and then if you fall somewhere close to it, you're probably going to do all right.
Wicked. And so when it comes to the actual exercises, is the whole high reps, lower weight for toning, low reps, higher weight for building muscle, does that still have a lot of weight to it?
Not
Pardon
really.
the pun, but
No,
like
no, I like that. That was good.
Yeah.
No, not really. So there's a couple of guys that have gone really, really in depth with the research on hypertrophy, on building muscle.
Yeah.
And some of the studies have been pretty amazing. So they decided, okay, well, let's look at the differences between training with relatively low reps, kind of in that classic, 6, 8, 10, 12 range for building muscle mass.
to doing 2 to 4 on
Yeah.
on like
Or
an
let's
80%.
go like 25, 30 and see what happens.
Oh, okay.
And it turns out that as long as you're getting close to failure within that rep range, whatever it happens to be. So if you're pushing a bench press and you've got 8 reps on your program and you finish at 8, but you could have done 14, that's not super effective for building muscle. But same thing if you're doing a bench press and you're using a relatively lightweight and you've got 25 on your program and you did 25 and stopped, but you could have done 50,
Yeah.
not as effective. However, if you picked a number and you went, okay, I've got 25 on my program, I got 23, and then I was worried I was going to, pass out underneath the bar. Okay. That's probably effective for building muscle mass. Same thing with 8. You're like, man, I did 8, but I think I got one more in me. I went for 9 and just about didn't make it. Perfect. That's probably where you're going to build muscle mass. So there's a large, complicated, sciencey stuff that goes into how muscle's made.
Yep.
realistically, the easiest thing to remember is if you want to build muscle, you have to get close to failure during your sets. And
Okay.
your rep range is largely irrelevant. You're going to build more strength on the lower side of things. You do build strength on the higher side of things. It's a little bit slower. But there's no dramatic change in like types of muscle that you build.
Yeah, like it won't
building
just...
muscle is building muscle.
Yeah.
There's multiple fiber types, and we can get into the science behind that stuff. But if your goal is to just look better naked and perform better in general, pick some stuff that you like doing, lift some heavy stuff, kind of close to failure, lift some lighter stuff close to failure because it's safer. That's usually the only thing that I recommend. Things like squats and deadlifts, probably don't take those to the point where you're like eyeball popping heavy and you can't do it without looking terrible.
Yeah.
But something like, I don't know, like a tricep exercise on a cable machine, like, yeah, you can go to you can't move anymore.
Yeah.
Give her.
Yeah.
You're not going to hurt yourself. Yeah, I mean, do it all the time, tendinitis, but you're not going to do any damage. So those are the ones that you can safely push to that realm of failure. And the other ones, maybe be a little bit more cautious of, but that's number one. Feed yourself well and then push hard in the gym close to failure. And it doesn't necessarily mean, 30 sets for each muscle group every week.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know the actual research number. It came out, but I don't remember it. They compared something like 12 working sets in a week for a muscle group and 30. And they found that both groups were as effective as long as they were taken to the same level of intensity. So you don't have to smash a muscle all the time to get stuff to grow. Like a reasonable amount of stimulation is good.
Yeah, and over time the healing will just make it happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're properly supported, eat proper food. And everybody who exercises in any capacity, whether it's martial arts or weight training or running, should be on creatine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Creatine monohydrate?
Yeah. Yeah, don't fall into the trap of buying the other ones. They're no more beneficial. Creatine doesn't work that way. It's like a reservoir. So once it gets into your muscles and starts to build up, you have it. There's no magical creatine that makes it more have it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's not the way that works. Once you build up enough of it in your system and you have the excess, then you just keep that reservoir.
Let's talk about that for a second. So creatine, for people who don't know, creatine monohydrate specifically is a supplement that you'll ingest and it then saturates your muscles. Is that?
Yeah, more or less. Again, without getting super sciencey, your body produces it or your body uses it naturally. It occurs naturally in red meat. So it's not like it's some designer compound.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it occurs naturally. In fact, part of it, creatine in general, your body uses that as a source of energy. So your 10-second sprint window. Static.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's okay. cut
Was
that
that
out.
in your ears?
Yeah, it was mine too. I got a bunch of static.
You guys all right over there? There's just a lot of fuzz. Ricardo? Okay.
Oh, we both got it on ours.
Yeah, that's strange. Okay. Anyhow.
Okay, back
on.
to creatine. So your first, like if you're running a 100-meter dash,
Yeah.
the primary energy system that you use is called your phosphocreatine system. It goes by a couple of other names, but basically creatine is the thing that produces power. Okay, so when you have a little bit more of it in your system, that's why it's so useful for weight training, because instead of not having enough oomph to get 5 or 6 reps, you might be able to get 6 or 7 or 7 or 8. You might be able to run just a little bit harder for 1 to 2 more seconds, things like that. So that it's super beneficial for just having a little bit more oomph, particularly on the strength power side of things.
Okay. Yeah.
But the reason I recommend it for everybody is it does a couple of other things as well. It helps bring water and nutrients into the cell. So it just does that because it's a fairly large molecule and your body needs it. So it grabs it and pulls it in, and it pulls it in with water and then a bunch of other stuff that goes along with water.
And that helps your muscles to grow.
For sure.
Faster,
That's
right?
why people get heavier when they start taking creatine. It's not because you gained a bunch of water in it and you suddenly look like puffy or anything. It's actually the opposite. Your body pulls water with the creatine into the cell, so it's away from the skin. It's actually a good thing.
And it pulls it away from the fat and
and pulls it into the muscles. That's a good thing. The other side of that is there's a huge amount of research for creatine and brain health. So if you're dealing with any sort of TBI, brain injury, concussion, memory issues.
Yeah, I read it was also good for like dementia symptoms.
Yeah, creatine can help. Creatine can help. And you don't, again, take it at the normal dose, 2.5 to 5 grams a day. You don't need to load it. You can if you want to fill that reservoir more quickly, but I don't tell my athletes to do that. Just 5 grams a day from now till forever.
Cool.
Cycle it off if you're cutting weight. That's all we do if they need to make a weight. But everybody else, if you're an athlete at all, recreational, professional, doesn't matter. You should be on creatine. Everybody should take it. It's one of the most, if not the most heavily researched supplement next to caffeine. Like it's safe. Yeah, it doesn't affect the kidneys. That's all baloney. Unless you have a pre-existing kidney condition, in which case, talk to your doctor. But 99% of other people should be on creatine.
Even if you're not necessarily an athlete, like it's
Yeah,
just a good
if you're
thing
just
to
doing
have.
recreational stuff, it's just good to have. Yeah,
Cool.
for sure.
How much, like, if you notice when you've put like your clients, when they come in, they haven't been on creatine, then you put them on it, and have you noticed like a substantial change in the rate of growth they have and whatever they're trying to accomplish?
Not in the way that you're thinking, because I don't deal with bodybuilders, so we don't
Mm.
track muscle growth quite the same way.
But for athletic performance,
Yeah, like they notice a difference. I think that's largely placebo,
Mm-hmm.
which is a thing. Like if you
Oh,
take
absolutely.
creatine and you feel like you're stronger longer, then are you stronger longer? Yes. So placebo's placebo's great. Like it people think that's a negative effect. Like, oh, it's just placebo, it's transient. No. Placebo means that something actually happened.
Yeah, you've initiated some sort of change
Yeah.
in your body.
So if I tell you that creatine's going to make you stronger and faster, and suddenly you're stronger and faster,
Yeah.
and we didn't give you creatine, you're still stronger and faster.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, exactly. That makes that's like I never understood why people would say like the placebo effect in a sense that it
In
has
a
like,
negative
a
way.
negative
No.
connotation.
It's
Yeah,
like when you do drug trials and they go, oh, the placebo effect was just as effective. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That means telling somebody that they were going to get better made them better.
Yeah.
And the end result was they were better. Wasn't that the point?
Mm-hmm.
Like placebo effect is great.
Well, it really is just like a tiny little like sight into the kinds of control people from around the world can have over their minds and
Yeah.
what effect the mind has on the body. Like you look
Hugely.
at those like the Shaolin monks and people over in China and some of those Buddhist temples and stuff, they'll put themselves through just like rigorous amounts of things like very painful too.
Mhm.
Like people will be like hanging in like a full reverse like an oversplits by their ankles off
Right.
of a post, and they're just like there for hours. And it just but it's all mind over matter,
Yeah.
right? And that's what the placebo effect seems to be essentially, is like you've given yourself the belief.
That something is going to improve or change or
Yeah.
be affected. Yeah. You know, as an aside, we have to be really careful when we talk to athletes. And like I'm actually about to do a video on this. You have to be careful about how you speak and the words that you use when you're talking to athletes or patients when you're dealing in therapy, because it's a little kind of on the woo-woo side of things. But if you tell somebody that they're hurt and they're broken and they have a problem, they start to associate with it. And so it makes the problem worse.
Mm-hmm.
You can make them weaker. You can make them more susceptible to injury. Talk to athletes all the time. If you believe that something's going to go wrong, Murphy's Law will tell you it's going to go wrong.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with whether or not you did or did not do something, but you suddenly become more aware. Like, oh, I'm really worried if I'm going to do this, I'm going to hurt my back. I'm really worried I'm going to hurt my back. And then all of a sudden, bang, something happens and you hurt your back.
Yeah.
Like, see, I knew it. Well, no, it's because you didn't react the way that you always react, because you were so hyper focused on this other thing, threw you off, and now that's what you decided to attune to. So we can do the same thing, in terms of strength work. If you tell somebody, wow, this is going to be too heavy for you, it's too hard. There's a very rare percentage of people that listen to that kind of stuff and go, fuck you, I'm not.
Yeah.
And it goes the opposite way. But for most people, they're influenced by the language that you use. So when you're dealing with athletes or yourself, like, talk to yourself nicely. That's really hard for a lot of us.
Yeah,
I'm not good at it, but
Well,
be nice to yourself,
and
because it helps.
It feels so corny when you're trying to practice self-talk, because like you just
I don't do it for that reason. I hate being embarrassed for myself. It's
yeah.
But you should. Don't do what I tell you. Do what I tell you to do. Don't do what I do.
Yeah.
You should be nice to yourself. You should be very, very careful about the words that you use when you're describing your problems or whatever it happens to be, because it can negatively affect it.
Words become reality.
Yeah,
very
yeah,
quickly.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yep, absolutely,
Wow.
it can affect it.
That's crazy. So, like, that's just a lot. I mean, going from
There's a whole conversation there that
yeah,
you can get into for.
I want to try and stick
Metaphysics.
a little more onto like the physical side of
That's
things.
probably
for a bit,
smart.
though, because like, I was hoping that out of this conversation, I'd be able to walk away by having a more asserted knowledge of what I'm doing versus what I shouldn't do in like my own kind of fitness world and things like that. So I've always been kind of like scared of carbs,
Right.
in a sense. Like I definitely notice when I've been eating more, I put the water on really fast.
Yeah,
Right.
But it's water.
Yeah.
So, like, have you broken down the word carbohydrate?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
it's
there's water there.
yeah.
Like, it's in the word.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you store roughly, I think it's 3 grams of water per 1 gram of carbohydrate. So
Okay.
yeah, so people that are chronically underfed with carbs suddenly gain a crap ton of weight when you feed them properly. Like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God, I gained so much weight. Yeah, it's water. It's okay.
You're
It
allowed
means
to.
you're
Yeah.
properly hydrated. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's all right. Your tissues are happier. You're not like beef jerky anymore. It's okay.
So
Right.
what, like, I when I'm like, I'm just trying to build my chest out or whatever. Um, do I have to wait until I feel like my chest is at a certain size before I start cutting the carbs out again and like toning like that, or like
Maybe
what?
what are you trying to do by cutting carbohydrate? What's the effect that you're after?
I just want a bigger chest and I want to look good naked again. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
so
pretty much it.
right, so that comes down to two things: one, build muscle; two, lose body fat.
Yeah.
There's nothing inherently magical about carbohydrate from either standpoint. I'm a believer that carbs are better for performance.
Yeah. Okay.
So if you want to build muscle, run, jump, throw things, train boxing, you should probably have carbs in your system. There's very few studies that show that fat is useful as a source for for high level athletics, and they tend to be on the like ultra endurance side of things. Like, great, you want to run 100 miles, being fat adapted is probably great. If you want to run 100 meters, it's shit. So don't do that, right? Like, but my keto guy said no.
No.
But when you're going to lose body fat again, it comes down to that whole thermodynamics equation. So once you've built up your chest and you've increased your calories and you put on a bunch of muscle, you gained your 5 pounds in the last 6 or 7 months, whatever it happens to be, and now you're going to show it all off.
Yeah.
Cutting carbs is an easy way to do it because you lose weight right away, but you don't necessarily lose body fat. Again, it just comes down to whether or not you're burning more than you're taking in.
And will you lose the muscle as well, though, if you start?
No. So maintaining muscle is actually not that hard.
It's tissue, right? It stays there.
Yeah, the key component to that is stimulus. So you can actually get people to be on really low calorie diets. I think this is an old study, so I'll get it wrong again. Don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure they did a study where they had people consuming like 800 or 1100 calories a day, which is really low.
It's like heroin chic.
Yeah, it's like heroin chic, right?
Yeah.
The stripper diet, just cocaine for 3 days.
And a salad, maybe.
Yeah,
almond once
exactly.
In a while,
But they consumed very, very low calories, and then they had them strength train, I think, once or twice a week. And all it took was getting enough weight into their system, so they had to lift reasonably heavy, and closer to the failure side of things, and they didn't lose hardly any muscle mass. So even though you're on a fairly calorie restricted diet, if you're weight training with some regularity, you don't lose a lot of muscle. Creatine also helps with that when you're in a caloric deficit. It stops a lot of that wasting, so you don't lose as much muscle mass. You're going to lose some being in a deficit. There's no way around it. Your body will feed it, will catabolize itself when it's necessary.
Yeah.
That is also kind of an interesting aside. So it's a little counterintuitive. When you're looking to gain weight, when you're looking to gain muscle, you need to consume enough protein to have that happen, and then you need to consume enough fuel to get everything else going. When you're looking at losing weight, you actually need to go higher in protein than you do when you're gaining weight. That seems to be the easier way to do it. So for whatever reason, your body, when it's building, just needs enough to kind of what's going on. But when you're losing weight, there's kind of this magic number. Then you start getting into that 1 gram plus per pound of body weight.
Yeah.
And it actually seems to be better for your weight loss and better for
more
preserving
protein
muscle
is
mass.
like more fuel.
Yeah,
almost,
so
right?
the research is actually really clear, and anybody that kind of decides to go against it just doesn't seem to understand how meta-analyses work. But the large picture is this: when you take every diet on the planet, like everything that anybody's ever designed, and you look at controlling calories, so you're in a controlled deficit, not a crash diet, but a reasonable deficit, and you give them all the same amount of protein. And usually in most of these diets, it's fairly well developed. They're in that, 0.8 grams per kilo kind of range. Once those two things are controlled, calories and protein, the rest of your diet between fats and carbohydrates is largely irrelevant. You can choose whichever one is easier for you. If you like eating carnivore style meals and you want to eat ribeye steak and consume high fat stuff all the time because you want to put butter in your coffee, power to you. If you're a carb guy and you just really want to eat rice and potatoes, that works too. And I think the research is actually skewed slightly more towards higher carb, lower fat being more successful. But I'm not sure it's statistically significant. It's just that it's a little bit better. Protein and calories are the only two things that really matter. Everything else is up to you. You can divide up the rest of your calories on fat and carbohydrate as you want. If you're trying to strength train, or you're trying to box or kickbox or whatever you're going back into, probably err on the side of more carbs. If you don't care for potatoes, then okay, you can consume more fat. But that actually doesn't matter. So once you get into your deficit and you have enough protein so that you don't lose a lot of muscle mass, divide it up any way you want.
Yeah. How do you feel about intermittent fasting in this whole range of things?
Yeah. So it's not magical. Again, there's a lot of buzzwords that get thrown around because what fasting does is it kind of gives your body a bit of a break, and so it can recuperate and regenerate a bunch of different things. Okay.
Actually, just
Go ahead.
sorry. I really got to use the washroom.
That's fine.
Sorry,
I could go too. That's
yeah?
perfect.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
perfect pause.
Guys, we're just going to take a quick washroom break here, okay? We'll be right back. So we were on the topic of fasting just before we took our little washroom break there. So let's pick up where we left off. You were saying that...
Yeah, so fasting, one of those things that has kind of all these buzzwords associated with it now because it's become really, really popular.
Ketosis and all this
Yeah,
other stuff.
okay. So ketosis basically just means that you're burning fat as a primary fuel source. That's what that means. It's not necessarily a lack of carbohydrate. It's that you're burning fat as a primary fuel source.
Which it also means that your body's kind of gone into survival mode, right?
Yeah, not necessarily. It just means that it's liberated fatty acids, and so that's what you're using for energy. There's a lot of complicated stuff that goes into that I'm not as familiar with. I have a friend of mine that's a biochem guy that would explain that better. Fasting, though, so the problem is that people call intermittent fasting like these feeding windows of 16 hours of not eating and 8 hours of eating. That's time-restricted eating. That's not even technically intermittent fasting. Fasting is normally days at a time between feedings. And so the research on fasting is largely based on that, where you take 48 hours between feedings. And so now you do get some health benefit. Okay, there's some gut repair that goes on. And, the big buzzword that they use all the time is autophagy, which is basically like this rejuvenation of cells. Okay, so your body's starving. It does a whole bunch of things to get rid of dead weight so that it's more efficient. Well, the unfortunate reality of that is so does calorie restriction in general. So once again, this idea of being over fat is the thing that's causing more health issues than anything else. So get your calories down, autophagy will happen. So you rebuild all those kind of, you regenerate the bad cells, get rid of them and build new ones. That happens independently of fasting, and just being in a calorie deficit will do it. But fasting is really good for a lot of people. So I don't really enjoy eating when I first wake up in the morning. I like my coffee and I have milk in it, but I don't really like consuming a lot of hard food.
Yeah, me too.
So I tend to be restricted in terms of my eating window anyways.
Yeah.
It just comes down to if it's an easier thing for you to do to control your intake, then it's the right thing for you to do. Again, down to that diet, which is the best diet, the one that you can stick to.
Yeah.
So if you're kind of one of those people that doesn't really like to eat until noon, so what?
Yeah.
Then don't eat till noon and have your first big meal at noon. I'm a little bit more of a believer in kind of that old adage of like eating your biggest meal earlier in the day.
Like the Germans do.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the old saying is like breakfast like a king and then, dinner like a pauper, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
So I think there's some value there. Large meals before bed have been shown to kind of disrupt sleep and things like that. And I think that's one of the mistakes that people that intermittent fast can do is they save it. They'll have a little bit of a break when they first start eating, and then they have this big, one big meal later on, and they do it too close to bedtime, and it has, rebound blood sugar issues, and your sleep quality is not great because you're too busy digesting food.
So how far out from your bedtime should you be stopping eating, I guess is the question. So like if I go, I normally go, I won't eat from about 10 p.m. to about 4, give or take. Okay. Right. And
so your feeding window is really short, like 6 hours.
Yeah. And I generally do to kick it off, I'll make a protein shake with a bunch of berries and veggies in it, whatever. Right. And then a couple hours later, I'll have my dinner. It's not necessarily huge because I can't really eat that much anyhow.
Right.
But
which is the big advantage to fasting, right?
Yeah.
Because you haven't eaten, you only have so much capacity in your stomach, and it's shrunk a little bit for not being full of food.
Yeah.
And so you get full earlier. So you eat less calories, right? Again, it's not magical.
Yeah.
You're just playing with physiology. Okay,
but if I want to be in bed and asleep by let's say midnight, right? So
a couple hours is usually good, right?
2 hours?
Yeah,
Okay.
A couple hours is usually plenty. You get most of your digestion done then. It's probably already started to pass into the colon. So
Yeah.
As long as you don't feel like you're still stuffed. I think that's kind of the big one. If you eat turkey dinner and then go straight to bed, that's less awesome.
Yeah, also mad acid reflux time.
Yeah, right. Again, because your body's trying to pump acid into the stomach, and there's only one small valve that stops it from going back up the chain, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you lay down after a heavy meal, like you're putting a lot of pressure on that poor little valve to try to stop it from going back up.
Yeah.
Which is where a lot of people do get acid reflux from and stuff. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if there's any hard science on that. I don't know it if there is any, but if you're not uncomfortable before you go to bed, that's probably fine.
Okay.
I'm not sure it's magical, but again, that whole idea of like, oh, if you eat before you going to bed, you're going to gain weight.
Yeah.
Why is the food magic at bedtime?
Does it make it but it makes it harder for you to fall asleep, right? Is that
It
what
can.
you're saying?
Yeah, it can. And then the opposite can be true too, because we've all experienced that, right? You have like a massive carbohydrate meal, like turkey dinner had yams and potatoes and then pie afterwards. People blame it on the tryptophan in turkey. It's like, is it that or is it the 1,000 grams of carbohydrate you just consumed? You get this massive insulin dump and your body gets into this happy mode. Like all your blood goes away from everything that's important, goes to your stomach. And so you're tired. So there's some evidence that consuming kind of slower digesting carbohydrate at night will help because you have this relationship between insulin and serotonin and cortisol and a bunch of other things. And so you sleep a little bit better. Don't eat just before bed and don't eat a monster meal. But again, it's not going to suddenly make you gain weight or lose weight because of a 30-minute window.
In your experience, have you had any clients or possibly in just personal experience, speaking to if their digestive process has been like less irritable since they started fasting? Like, is there anything?
Awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know again if there's any research that supports it based on people that have IBS or IBD. I'd be curious to know because maybe it would help.
I've got a bit of a theory for it as far as it goes, just from like watching certain video. Everyone watches Instagram shit,
Sure.
and a lot of it's just bullshit anyhow. But I've kind of gathered from a lot of it that like your body didn't evolve to be constantly digesting food. And like it like to give it time to fully process whatever you'd eaten in like an adequate window, then allows it to like reset and be able to process food again in a healthier way. So that like it lowers your risk of diabetes and stuff like that, I guess.
I don't know enough about the research on type 2 diabetes in general. Again, usually that comes down to insulin resistance. That usually happens because people again are over fat. There's not a lot of people that develop it because they're just chronically addicted to sugar. You can. I'm sure it happens. It's just not as prevalent as people that tend to overeat and have overfat.
Yeah, less about the sugary foods as much as it is about
body fat. Being unhealthy in general.
Yeah.
But from that standpoint, like I'm not saying it doesn't help. It probably does to some degree. Again, I don't know any of the research behind whether or not that stuff actually makes an impact.
Yeah.
You can talk about the evolution side of things and say, well, okay, so we didn't evolve to do this, we didn't evolve to do that. Yeah, that's true. But again, the thing that made humans so successful is that we're super adaptable. We maybe didn't evolve to eat all the time, but we did evolve eating brain tissue. So if you think that's super fun, then you can go ahead and do that stuff, right? If you really like eating head cheese, then that's
Liver
great.
King right there.
Yeah, Q Liver King. It's like you don't
want to get smarter, eat brains.
Yeah, like you don't necessarily have to follow, the ancestral lifestyle idea just because that's what our ancestors did. They did it because they had to, not because it was necessarily optimal. And I think that's one of the things that people seem to misunderstand is the human body can be really well adapted to do a lot of different things. It can survive in really extreme scenarios where you're not eating all the time. It has a mechanism to make that viable. But why?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can survive eating once every 2 days if I consume enough calories. But why? That's miserable. I don't want to go through, the keto fog if anybody's ever had that before. If you cut out carbohydrate, you get dumb for a few days.
Yeah, it's almost punch
tired.
drunk.
It's terrible. So when your body starts going into that mode where it's processing fat primarily. So, you can, sure. If you like it, again, by all means, I think that's more beneficial than anything. If you do intermittent fasting, your guts feel better, your brain feels better, you enjoy food more because you can control what you're eating. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's magic. Again, like I don't think there's something about it that suddenly changes everything about your physiology, but we didn't evolve to need flush toilets either. I'm not going to stop using one.
That's a good point.
Right? Like,
That's a good point.
You don't need to brush your teeth, but probably a good idea. Yeah. We know that flossing reduces, cardiovascular risk, so that's probably a good idea too, right?
Yeah, plaque from your teeth goes to plaque in your heart.
Yeah,
right?
it's like, okay, so maybe take a few things, like, yes, you don't need it, but why not?
Yeah.
Make your life easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah, okay, cool. That makes a lot of sense. Do you think like the results of fasting or any dietary habits or changes for that matter, I'm under the impression that our genetics probably play a pretty big part in what works best for us, right? Like, so,
yeah, and personal preference for sure.
Yeah. So, like, I guess when it comes to, like, say someone is doing great on a carnivore diet or whatever, right? Do you think it's because of the fact that they're eating just meats, or do you think it's more the fact that they come from a lineage where, say, their ancestry is in like a very cold place, where like they don't have vegetables as much, right?
So again, I don't know any research. Well, there probably is some.
This is all
just
anecdote.
So
you guys all know, this is all anecdotal, theoretical stuff.
Yeah. However, I have noticed a fairly large trend when it comes to different kind of racial populations.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a fairly large number of athletes that are of Asian descent, and their tolerance for carbohydrate is really high. Rice in particular, right? They can just handle it like nobody's business. Again, because they've been eating it for thousands and thousands of years.
They invented the fucking noodle. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah. I also have a couple of Middle Eastern guys that I work with. And the prevalence of wheat intolerance is almost non-existent.
Really?
No, because they that's where it originated, right? That was the breadbasket of the world for the longest time. So they can handle most grain-based products way more than other people can. If you're Nordic descent, nothing grew up there, right? Like your root vegetables and meat primarily, right? With some seasonal fruits, but not
meat
many.
And potatoes
the meat and potatoes diet, yeah, because nothing grows when it gets that cold. So I think there's probably some reality there that it could influence your tolerance to certain foods. Always the best answer is experiment. Try it. Like, okay, if I realize that I'm largely, Russian, then I can just drink my potatoes and maybe that'll that works. But try it, because again, I think it just comes down to what works best for you. So if you play around with it and you go, actually, I can tolerate this really, really well, then great. If I can't tolerate these other things, then also not so good, right? There's genetic populations on the planet that don't have enzymes to break down alcohol as well.
Yes. Yeah,
right?
This is true.
That's genetic. That's not because, they're broken or anything. Their cultures didn't develop alcohol. They never developed an adaptation to alcohol, and so they still don't have
their body doesn't have the enzyme required to.
It doesn't break it down as fast, so they get drunk faster. They don't process it as well, right? Yeah, all those things. So yes, it's totally viable.
There's a friend of mine I knew when I was backpacking through New Zealand, and she's Vietnamese, I think. But we used to go out for drinks, and she'd be like 2 drinks in, beet red. She'd call it the Asian blush.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
I guess that's like a thing. Then like it is a result of just them not having alcohol in the diet for as long, I guess.
Yeah.
Which is strange, because I always thought rice wine and things like that go back pretty far, but I guess they weren't actually fermenting rice to drink it.
No.
Until like the Anglos started coming over.
Yeah, I think grain was probably before grape. As far as I'm aware, again, I'm probably wrong, but as far as I'm aware, I'm pretty sure they were like bread-based products that ended up getting wet and fermenting. Yeah, and then they would drink the resultant from that. So like super raw alcohol.
Well, that's how we got beer. Like it
was like an accident, right? Yeah, like a bunch of stuff got wet.
Did you ever see that documentary? This documentary. It's called How Beer Changed the World, and I guess the first known remnants of what could have had beer in it were these wheat baskets that were. They held wheat for the labor force for the Great Pyramids, and it got rained on. sat in this bin,
Right.
fermented,
Fermented.
and next thing you know, they had like what is essentially, I guess organic beer.
Right. Yeah,
from back
exactly.
then, yeah.
And of course, they'd feed it to those people because they didn't care. Like, well, here's
Yeah.
your water for the day.
Yeah.
Tastes like the wheat. Wow, who cares?
Yeah, and next thing you know, they're like, I can build this whole pyramid because I'm drunk as fuck. Let's do this. Right? Yeah.
Maybe that's why it's sloped.
Yeah. Yeah. Just got that much better at math. Too.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
Keep all the angles perfect.
It's like when you shoot pool. Like, I'm way better when I'm hammered.
Oh, yeah.
You're not, but you really
Yeah.
think you are.
I try to golf sober, but I hate admitting it, but after I've had a beer or two,
Yeah, it loosens you up a little bit,
I'm
right?
just hitting better. Yeah. I don't know what it is, but, I guess it's the liquor, right? Mild
That's
poison.
why I golf. I golf just so I can drink.
Yeah. You and 90% of the other people
For sure.
who golf.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
What's your handicap? I don't care.
Yeah.
Miller Lite is my handicap.
No shots on Sundays.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The 19th hole is why I play.
That's awesome, man. So where were we now? We were talking about the fasting,
Alcohol fasting.
genetics, alcohol. Okay, so all these things all entailed and stuff. Do you think genetics plays much of a trait into what types of exercises work better for you as well?
Whoa. Again, I think it just comes down to what you... I think there's more impact from what you did as a kid than there is what you did culturally. So
Okay, yeah.
if you grow up running and jumping, you're going to be more likely to be good at running and jumping.
So it most definitely is nurture over nature.
In that side of things, I think so. We know from research that athletes that grow up to be really good athletes are traditionally not single sport athletes.
Yeah.
As a rule, doing more things when you're younger has more benefit to your longevity in sport. So hockey players that also play basketball and are on the track team or wrestle or whatever are typically better and play their game longer at a higher level than the ones that try to specialize too early. There's certain sports where that's not as effective. Things like gymnastics, unfortunately, tends to be young because the flexibility component's really important.
Yeah.
But for just about everything else, the more you do, the better. And it's interesting. You can dramatically change your phenotype. Like you can change your body's primary modality. There's lots of guys that have gone from being bodybuilders that have decided to take up triathlons.
Yeah.
And you just watch what the body does. It adapts incredibly well. And it doesn't necessarily matter about, your background. It's just what you train for is what your body's going to get good at. It can be wildly different. There's a world champion powerlifter by the name of Steffi Cohen who holds a couple of records, and she's she got like a 550 or 600 pound deadlift or something like that. Like she's incredible. Yeah.
Jesus.
And she's just taken up boxing in the last number of years.
Okay.
And I remember listening to her speak, and she said, when I first started, I couldn't run around the block.
Really?
Yeah, and
Wow.
and road work is so critical to it's not critical to boxing, but it's so deeply ingrained in the sport that everybody runs.
Yeah.
She was a power lifter. She didn't run.
No. Yeah.
That's not a thing.
No.
But she does now.
Yeah.
And her body's adapted to it. Had she been a runner earlier, would that have had an impact? I don't know. Probably.
Just go back a little bit there. You said phenotype. Phenotype is the what exactly? That's like the given structure of your body?
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. So somebody who's you can have a predisposition. So if you're, 5'10", 155 pounds with, a 40-inch inseam, you're probably going to be a little bit better at running than I am. I'm 5'11" and I've got a 32-inch inseam and I weigh 230 pounds, right? Like I run like a rhino.
Yeah, I feel
I'm not a gazelle.
Yeah, that was all sprints, no long distance.
Yeah, exactly. Now I have run. I did for quite a while, decided that I was going to try to take up running and run distance. And I was able to get to the point where I could run, a 5K in just under 30 minutes. It's not remarkable speed by any stretch of the imagination, but to move a person of my size for that long at a reasonable rhythmic rate is pretty good.
I miss being able to run that far, man. Like I try to run even like 2 to 3K. Yeah, I get so winded.
Yeah, it's hard. Again, your body just adapts to what it does. We were talking before we started recording about, wrestling and what happens when you suddenly go, oh man, I went back to jujitsu and I used to wrestle all this time. And, I had one class on a mat and I was dying after the first 15 minutes.
Literally throwing up in the bathroom 5 minutes before the class is over.
Like my wrestlers will tell you, like wrestling shape is a thing. Mat shape is a thing. You can do all the running and air dyne and, pushing prowlers and all that shit that you do in the off season or when you're injured or for extra conditioning. It is not the same as doing the sport.
Yeah.
We make a pretty big effort with the guys that I work with to keep 90% of the conditioning that they do in sport context. So we try to design drills or things like that they do on a mat, on a bag, in class with certain different constraints, as opposed to trying to do box jumps and burpees and sled pushes and pull-ups all in sequence and saying, oh, that's mixed martial arts training. Well, it's not, because
You're not training martial arts.
You're not training martial arts.
Yeah,
Right? It's
you're
different.
pushing a sled.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
lineman
Try being a wrestler and not wrestling.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And never mind, the technical skill involved. I mean, just the fact that try moving another body in practice for an hour without moving another body in practice. Like you can't prepare for that without doing the thing.
Yeah. Like we don't have fucking robots that will wrestle you. At least not yet, right?
No,
so,
exactly. You have to do the sport. Like Lance Armstrong is a great example. So say what you want about his drug use, but the guy has a genetic predisposition to buffering lactate. So basically he can handle that burning sensation better than everybody else. His body gets rid of it sooner. So his ability on a bike to go at a pace that other people would struggle with is phenomenal, right? The guy that just broke the world record in the marathon was the same thing. You ever seen videos of people trying to run his race pace?
No.
Like it looks like everybody else is sprinting and he's
Tell me about this guy though. What do you like?
I don't know his name. It was kind of all over the news just recently. So he set another world record in the marathon pace.
For fastest marathon?
For fastest marathon, like sub 2 hours kind of thing, right? Like the guy's phenomenal.
Less than 2 hours.
Less than 2 hours.
A whole marathon.
Yeah, a whole marathon, less than 2 hours. Most people run a half in that time, right?
Yeah.
So he's running twice as quickly. So if you break down his time splits, like he's running at world championship level for like the 1,500 meter race. For like the 800, he's holding that pace though, not for 4 minutes.
Oh my
he's holding
God.
it for 2 hours.
It's like the new David Goggins.
Yeah, exactly.
Insane.
But yeah, so instead of running fast.
Yeah.
So watch the videos of people trying to run his pace for any given length of time. Like they just fall apart. It's comical. And he just rolls through it. It's impressive. So Lance Armstrong on a bike had this ability to push and stay at a pace that nobody else could maintain. You can argue drugs, but he's just genetically gifted.
Yeah.
Because when he went to not do that, when he went to do marathons and triathlons, he didn't do well. Well, why? Like he's this genetic freak. You should be able to do that. No, because he's really good on a bike.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't run. So when he went to running, it's like, well, yeah, you might have this genetic benefit, but you're not a runner, dude.
Yeah.
You spent the last 20 years on a bike.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, okay.
there's a length of time there that you haven't trained for in a sport that you don't do. You're not automatically good at it because you have this other genetic bonus.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense though too. Like, I mean, your body adapts, right?
Yeah.
And if you're doing the same exercise for, like you said, 20 years, like other things are not going to work as
Right.
well.
Yeah, you can't just switch and assume it's going to make sense.
Yeah.
But you can switch. That's the cool part, is you can go from being a muscle-bound bodybuilder. Your body will eat itself. It'll get down to the point where it's decided to do something else. I have a friend of mine that's a high-level strength coach and physique guy. He used to be a power lifter. He was monstrously strong. Used to be kind of on the physique side of things and still works with clientele that way. But he's recently taken up triathlons. Again, for the same reason. Like, I just want to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why not?
Hard,
Yeah.
because he's not used to doing that stuff. But,
Yeah.
since he moved to Australia, he's gone, I'm going to do this other thing and taken up a different sport just for fun.
Wow. That's pretty deep.
But you can. That gives you that's the coolest part about being human. When it comes to a physical, capability, you
Yeah.
might not have the gifts to do it at a high level,
But you have the equipment.
but you have the equipment to do it.
Yeah.
You can do pretty much anything if you train long enough, hard enough, and smart enough.
Yeah.
Right? Without blowing yourself up. But
I got a bit of a first-hand experience that this year, actually. I joined a slow pitch beer league. Like a fucking,
Nice.
And I know it's not like I'm like going from like MMA into like fastball or anything like
sure,
that.
but learning
right?
to hit a ball if you've never done it before is a hell of a
Man,
skill.
I played one season of baseball when I was in high school. I smoked that thing out of the park at my tryouts. Got on the team, no problem. Didn't hit another ball the whole season. That's just how it was. I lucked out, and that was it for me, right? But I realized that when we were doing this slow pitch thing this year with Ryan out there, when I even though I couldn't necessarily like drill the ball out there anymore, I didn't have the coordination for it, right? I golf, so the ball's
Right.
standing still when
You're
I
right.
hit it, right?
Yeah.
I still had that sprint in me
Right.
from like
So you could still get to the base before anybody
yeah,
else.
from when I was playing wide out in football and stuff. It's like you get in that stance and you hear the ball hit. It's almost like a shot of the gun and you
Right.
just go. And that was the first time in like since high school that I was actually like peak sprinting
Right.
effort, and it was so cool to feel again.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I remember what it was like to be athletic. This is kind of fun.
Yeah, it was like first time I've been on a team sport in a long time. You know, I mean, I got into MMA again this year with you guys back at TriStar, and that was another part of like, holy shit, like I'd never boxed before.
Right.
I did Taekwondo at some point, but like I'm trying to think of what I could do.
That's always a fun one.
That
People are
for
like,
me,
well,
actually.
gloves are 16 ounces. You ever try to just hold your hands in front of your face with 1 pound
Oh my
weights
God,
for an hour?
I had no idea until I got in there.
Yeah, like you can't wash your hair the next day. You can't lift your arms up past your
It's
past your chest.
insane, man. Like I had no idea. Like I always knew that boxing cardio was intense, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they didn't tell me is that the cardio is still going when you put the gloves on.
Yeah.
It's not just the skipping the jump rope or whatever.
No, that's the easy part.
Yeah. It's like hitting the bag until you can't lift your hands anymore.
Yeah. And then trying to do it more.
Yeah. Insane. Like
with power.
Insane. Yeah.
Not looking like something out of a cartoon, right? Like trying to do it with some degree of technical capability and force is really challenging.
So do you think like obviously there's some athletic styles that like have no overlap whatsoever, right? Like being I don't know, I'm trying to think right now, like a power lifter to being a swimmer.
Right.
Do you think people who
that's a good one.
Yeah, I know, right? Like
sink like a rock.
Yeah. Next thing you know, we're gonna have what's his name, Eddie Hall. Is that the guy? UK
in
strongman?
MMA.
Yeah, he's gonna try to like swim a record butterfly or something.
Is he really?
No. I'm just.
I was gonna say, really? That's something I've never heard of.
Imagine
That'd be
something
terrible.
Like that? That'd be insane. He's the least aquadynamic person I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, it'd be like a fast walrus. Walruses are probably fast. That's not even fair to a walrus.
I was gonna say, like, walruses are pretty quick for their size in that water, you know. But like, so do you think that people who practice things like MMA and like combat sports, stuff like that, do you think they're more well-rounded to be able to handle different sports outside of that realm because of the fact that they engage with pretty much every aspect of it, except for maybe sprinting and like?
So yeah, I would. Yeah, actually, I kind of do. The more varied the exercises are that you do, the more variety you can handle. I think that kind of goes without saying. But MMA has that in spades. You know, you do so many different things from, you know, if you're a really good mixed martial artist, you're not just doing kickboxing and grappling. You tend to do specific wrestling classes, you know, that don't involve the jiu-jitsu side of it. You might do judo. You might do boxing and kickboxing, which are two different styles, which gives you very different exposures. You probably do some strength and conditioning stuff. So you're probably in a weight room. If you're with me, you'll do Olympic lifting. Cool. And I don't think that's because it's magical either. I just like it because I like to coach it.
Yep.
So, you know, my athletes learn it because it makes me interested.
Well, there's a lot of explosiveness is an important factor in
it's critical in probably every sport. I think jiu-jitsu is probably one of the few where you can get away with being a little less explosive because there's more time. But every other sport on the planet pretty much requires you to be fast in some capacity or another. So, you know, like I said, the Olympic lifts have traditionally been, you know, pushed as, you know, the golden standard for power development. That's not true. There's a lot of things that work just as well, if not better. Like I said, I like to teach them because I'm selfish. I like to be involved in a training session, and teaching somebody to jump with weights in their hands is boring as fuck. Teaching somebody to do a power clean is way more fun. So I get something out of it. That's really the only reason that I use them still is, you know, if you're not proficient with them, we use them as a warm up and a teaching tool. If you are, then we use them as a loaded exercise, but there's no magic to them. I just like them. Yeah. But yeah, because you get exposure to it. And then we do track days with my wrestlers. They run, and wrestlers don't run in the ring. No. So they have no need to run. Yeah. So I don't get real technical with running mechanics. I'm not a field sport guy. I'll make that very clear. You know, one of the things that I learned very quickly about working at a university is it's hard to be a head coach when you're involved with every sport because they're so different. Yeah. And I have, you know, a pretty decent niche with power sports that don't involve running. Okay. So volleyball athletes and cyclists and wrestlers and boxing and things like that. Then they may jog, but they're not running athletes. Okay. I have a much harder time, you know, with sports like football, soccer, things like that involve running mechanics because they're running so much. Yeah. You know, I didn't teach, I worked with track and field, but because their sport is running, the nice part about that is I had nothing to do with their running mechanics. So they actually did really well with the stuff that we were doing as, you know, as well. Because again, it's so far different. Whereas the other sports need some strength and conditioning on the field. And that's not my area of expertise. Okay. So if I run my runners or if I run my MMA guys, I'm not concerned about how they run because even our maximal stuff, isn't that maximal. They're not they're not fast enough.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Again, wrestlers running is comical. Right? Like most of them aren't good runners. I have one athlete who likes to run.
I just picture them running all hunched over.
I mean,
the full
most of them
gorilla
are.
run.
You're not
Yeah.
wrong. Most of them are. It's pretty bad. And I'm sure their mechanics are terrible. I like I said, I have a few that just like running, and so we run them more for their mental health than for their performance benefit. Just because they kind of the way that they grew up and they like running, so we'll run them. But it's not necessary because they don't run in their sport, right? You're not running around a mat.
Yeah.
Your positioning's totally different. The weight on your lungs and your body is totally different. Same thing with MMA, right? I don't like running my MMA guys either. They don't run.
Yeah.
They do a lot of jumping and moving and sidestepping, but they don't run.
Yeah.
So I don't need them to. If they want to, then fine.
Yeah.
But it's not necessary. So the field sports stuff is a totally different ballgame.
Yeah.
I don't specialize in it because they need it. They need to learn how to run in patterns and run in curves and stop and change direction and things like that. And the stuff that I do is, largely tied to changing direction in a small space, not changing direction and then accelerating.
Yeah. So I guess like the things some MMA guys might not be good at are sports like soccer or like.
Yeah, I mean,
like-
they might run, and so they might have some capability there.
Yeah.
But if they played when they were younger, probably do.
Yeah.
If they didn't, then no.
Yeah.
Soccer's a really weird one. So it's one of the few sports that I think is like years and years and years behind in terms of its development for strength and conditioning compared to most others. Like they just haven't embraced it the way that a lot of other ones have, particularly on the men's side.
Well, there's even like they've even got this whole new wave of like strength and conditioning for golfers now. Like they're
So
doing
that's
some
that's
insane
viable
weight
because they've
work.
gotten athletes involved, right?
Yeah.
Like if you go back in the day and you look at the John Daly's of the world, they're not impressive people.
Oh,
But
yeah.
any way that you want to swing it, watching I know, right? It's like your weight joke earlier.
Yeah.
But any way that you look at it, Tiger, revolutionized golf because he was athletic.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought this awareness to the fact that you can improve on a golf game by being an athlete.
Yeah, because he used to say, "What, he'd go run 8 miles, hit the gym for an hour, go hit a bucket of balls."
Yeah.
And
I mean, there's other aspects of that people don't understand. They say, well, you don't need to have big muscles or anything like that to swing a golf club. You don't, but you do have these really, really high stress scenarios that you have to perform under, and having really, really good cardiovascular health and things like that is really good for bringing your heart rate back down and managing stress and a few other things. So it has knock-on effects. That doesn't necessarily mean you need to be good at doing Olympic lifting to be a golfer, but there's other fringe benefits there. And so, yeah, there's a huge amount of research and now certifications that have done that. But
that's interesting. Have you worked with anybody trying to go in like pro golf? And you like
so I worked with the golf team when I was at the university
Cool.
and really, really enjoyed it. There's I got to work with a couple of other professionals that specialize in that stuff. So I did kind of foundational strength programming, and then they took over a lot of the specific side of things.
I'm assuming it was a lot of like rotational.
Yeah, and counter rotation. So again, because golf swings one direction only, you tend to do a lot of stuff to counteract some of that. I have a phrase that I use with most of my athletes is that when you're good at a sport, I expect you to be pretty fucked up because you've created those adaptations that are going to allow you to be good at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Except it does come with a drawback. You've done disservice to other movement patterns. So
Massive
if you,
muscle imbalance.
yeah, exactly. So you swing one way really well, you don't swing the other way. My volleyball players are always comical because they have one arm that's really, really mobile.
They're spiking arms.
Yeah, they're spiking because they rotate through their rib cage and they get all this big extension, and then you go to the other side and it's like, they go nowhere. They're just stuck.
Kind of lopsided.
Yeah.
right?
So the problem with most strength coaches that don't really understand that dynamic is, or you get these posture guys or any of the stuff, and they go, well, you have to be balanced and you have to equalize all these different things. No, you don't. Like, you need to still have those adaptations that allow you to be good at your sport. You just want to try to minimize the potential damage on the other side. So, you do stuff that stabilizes the back, not necessarily that tries to twist a golfer the other direction, because you want them to be able to twist really hard and really far one way. So you don't want to affect that.
Yeah.
You just want to make sure that there's some balance, that they don't develop disc problems or right, that kind of thing. So you have to be careful, right? Yeah, I don't want a boxer to suddenly have their chin like great posture with their head up and their shoulders back. Like don't present the target, right? I expect them to have their chin tucked behind their shoulder at all times.
Fighting is probably one of the only situations where having a natural hunch will
is
probably
probably
be
good. Yeah, wrestlers too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to be careful with some of that stuff, but it's all going to be beneficial. You just depends on how much and for what.
Okay.
Most strength sports, like Everything that we do in a weight room is general. So you talk
Yeah.
about training for golf. Well, you can do specific exercises for golf, but the minute you start to get too close to the sport, that's where you actually start to run into problems. You don't want to swing, a club attached to a cable.
Mm.
It throws off your mechanics. It actually makes you worse, right? You might be
Yeah.
trying to do something similar to your sport, but it's going to it's going to go the other direction. You're actually going to make yourself worse at your sport.
So you kind of want to train them in a sense where you change as much, like you improve as much as you can outside of what already feels natural to them.
Yeah, you're trying to improve their foundations. You're trying to give them a bigger toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
But as an athlete, so you as a golfer, you can go to the gym and want a big chest. Great.
It
There's
gets in
some
the way, though.
it can.
Yeah.
I think there's some instances where, you could argue that. But if your goal is performance, you want to build a big chest and you want to do some other things for golf, then great. You're still going to do the same basic exercises that you were going to do before.
Mm-hmm.
You're still going to squat. You're still going to do all those other things. It doesn't mean that the squat's going to be the thing that necessarily makes you a better golfer, but having stronger legs has been shown to improve golf swing mechanics, right? You can, when you have to duck under and drive your hips through the ball and things like that, learning to control hip function and glute mechanics is really important. Well, you don't necessarily do that weighted, but having stronger legs and glutes is going to improve your ability to do that. It's up to you as an athlete to make that happen in your game.
So you're telling me if I just stop skipping leg day, I'd take like at least 4 strokes off my game? Is that what you're telling me?
That's actually the number. Yeah. You add 30 yards to your drive and you take 4 strokes off your game just by doing leg day once a week.
That's a quote from Bryson DeChambeau too. Like, absolutely. It's 100%.
I just think that in general, being strong is probably better for most people. And I don't mean powerlifter strong. I don't think you have to get underneath a bar and bench press a Buick. No. I think there's a limit to that. And I'm kind of a strength guy. I like my athletes to be strong. And I've people that know me from the industry will know that I'm kind of more on that side of things.
It's good to feel strong too, because you feel capable.
It is,
you really
but
do.
There's a limit to that. Like I deal with a lot of guys that come in that are actually quite weak. And so I've developed a reputation for being a strength guy, but that's because the athletes that I get are
wimpy.
Yeah. Like, we just had, when I was doing some of the teams at the university, some of them just hadn't been exposed to weight training at a young age. And so they were way far behind their peers. They had guys that they were competing against that were monsters. And the guys on our team were not. So it's not a matter of power development. They're physically weak. They just can't handle the same kind of workload. So, it just comes down to what the athlete needs. But getting stronger is usually beneficial. There's a limit.
I would imagine, yeah.
Yeah, generally speaking. Again, you don't need to be a power lifter to be an MMA fighter. In fact, it's probably not a good idea. But
if you can teach your body that lifting heavy shit keeps it alive longer, it might just...
There's benefit there, man. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It does good things to your tissues and your bones.
Mm-hmm.
So even from that standpoint, that's fairly beneficial. From a longevity standpoint, if you're a recreational athlete, you're in your 60s and, you're worried about your golf game, cool. Lift weights. It'll improve your golf game and you'll live longer.
Yeah, your knees might not hurt as much, It's,
yeah, like do some cardio, do some weightlifting. Like the two of those things are the one of the few things that's been researched heavily to say you want to live longer, you got to lift weights and you got to do some cardio. And end of story, right? Your heart has to be healthy and you got to have some bone density.
So, out of all those sports and like athletes that you've worked with and stuff, I'm curious on the mental aspect of it as well. So like, which out of all of the varying athletes that you've coached and trained with and stuff, is there a specific type of athlete, like whether it be MMA or baseball, football, whatever, that comes to you and you've noticed a more determined mindset from any of these specific sports? Or is it entirely unique to the person? Like, does a person growing up with an experience in a certain area of athleticism, does that also train their mentality better than other sports?
So yes to both. Okay. I'm lucky enough in that I deal with mostly athletes that work at a fairly high level. Mm-hmm. So it's, as far as I know, it's largely individual. You either have the work ethic and have the dedication, because it's not even work ethic. It's more about the fact that you have the discipline to keep doing what you are doing when you don't want to, right? Mm-hmm. The day that you don't want to get out of bed, the David Goggins stuff, right? I lay in bed and I'd rather just hit the snooze alarm, but I got to get out of bed because I'm a little bitch. The guys that are able to do that are typically more successful.
And what do you find them in a specific area?
Well, that's where I was kind of going is I'm lucky enough to work with athletes at a high level. Mm-hmm. The ones that get there tend to be those people already. Okay. So does a certain sport breed more of them? I'm not sure it does. Those people tend to rise higher in their sport.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if it's the sport that does it, because I've worked with really high-level volleyball players, And I've worked with really high-level volleyball players that aren't mentally tough and don't make it. I have a couple of stories from people that we thought were going to be, you know, Canadian national team kind of superstars, and they just didn't really want to. They went to school down in the States and had a great time and decided, this was good enough.
Yeah.
I don't really want to work harder to be better than that. That was great. I enjoyed my time, and I probably have the potential to go further, and I just don't want to, or didn't have the work ethic for it, or whatever. And then you have other people that are the polar opposite. I have 2 athletes that I work with right now that walked onto the team and ended up becoming MVPs and top scorers and, playing pro because they just didn't stop working.
Nice.
I still love that quote that, hard work beats talent, or hard work beats talent when talent stops working hard.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or when talent doesn't work hard, because it's true. You have to have some level of mental fortitude to do that. And I'm not convinced you can train a lot of that. I know it's big in sport. You got to train to be tough. You got to push through, train the mental toughness. I don't think you do. You either have it or you don't. I've never met an athlete who performs at a high level that isn't mentally tough. And I think they just get weeded out. Like, the process of being a good athlete is hard.
Yeah.
At anything. If you want to be a good marathon runner, it's hard. If you want to be a good enduro hiker, which is kind of one of the things that I do, it's hard. If you want to be good at jiu-jitsu, it's hard. If you want to be good at golfing, it's hard because you have to spend so much time doing it that if you don't want to, or on the days that you really don't want to, you decide not to, you're not going to be able to accumulate enough time doing it to get better. And so you're just going to kind of self-regulate to the mediocrity, right? You're just not going to rise to the top and be good at it.
Yeah. So you feel like once you've surpassed average people, like, what more is there? But for the top guys, it's like, well, there's the top. That's what I want to take on.
And so, okay, so those guys are at the top for a reason because they're even more mentally tough than you.
Yeah.
Right. But, they might have more talent, or they might just work harder, or they might just not stop working.
So there's no particular sport in mind that would breed that?
Not really. I think that there's probably some reality to sports that have a physical component to them or pain component to them that makes you a little bit tougher. That being said, I know some volleyball players that are absolute monsters, right? That have no quit in them, that have nothing left, and they'll still go. They'll train hard. They'll be sick with who knows what, and still show up to practice when
like
they
a
don't
border
need to.
collie.
Yeah,
They'll
exactly. Like, I'll just work myself to death.
Yeah.
They'll just run until their heart gives out. I do believe that certain combat sports are probably more likely to breed that because not only are you working hard, but you're taking punishment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know many people tougher than wrestlers or anybody with a wrestling background. You don't even have to have wrestled that long.
No, it's just if you can do a couple seasons in wrestling, then,
you're probably all right. Yeah, because it sucks.
Yeah, you're getting
like a technical practice is not easy, right? Like, it's a light day today because we're doing technique. Yeah, you're still messed up because you got taken to the mat 80 times in the first half an hour. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Like, it sucks.
Yeah, people don't understand the kind of burn that comes with constantly rubbing against these mats.
It's terrible. Like, go to a boxing class. I don't mean like a 30-minute hit. Go to a proper kickboxing class and understand that now you're going to do that and have to deal with another person who's going to try to punch you in the face. It's already hard enough.
Yeah.
But now do it when you're taking punishment and you have fear.
Yeah, that was crazy to me. Like, when I went to my first sparring session at TriStar there, I'd wrestled, right? I'd never done full-on sparring, though, like that. In Taekwondo, we had the big gear and stuff, though. And it's all kicks. It's like, okay, whatever. I get in there. First time
right hook really sucks.
Yeah, it's the first time I've been punched in the face in over, since I was in high school. And it was like, whoa, hang on a second. This is actually happening now.
That hurt.
Yeah. Yeah, and then to, have a moment where you kind of think, I kind of liked that.
Right.
Is weird. But
and some people really have it and some people don't. I don't. I did it. Yeah. I did it because I was too proud to quit. So, short story. I joined the wrestling team in university and I lasted less than a week. Okay, because I hated it. It was terrible. I got put with a guy that tied me into a pretzel. Like, I puked on the first practice because we ran bleachers for 45 minutes. It was terrible, right?
Yeah,
I quit. I was like, this is awful.
This
is not wrestling. This is not what I remember. This is terrible. And then I got into MMA because that was smarter.
Yeah. So, because you can take a break with boxing once in a while.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and I was just too proud to quit that one. So after I did that, but again, it's the same problem. It's like, I hated getting hurt.
Yeah.
And I don't really like hurting other people. I like jujitsu because the end result is not to do damage, right? Like, you're not trying to actually hurt your training partner. Unfortunately, I think in boxing and kickboxing, even if you like the guy that you're working with,
you're going in there to kill.
Yeah, like all of my guys that I work with, still come in and they laugh about the fact that they, gave their brother a black eye, right?
Yeah.
You guys are built different. different. Anybody that boxes for a living, or does it recreationally at a high level,
man. Absolutely.
Yeah, they just like pain. I have lots of guys, two in particular, that they don't really show up until they get hit in the face. Right?
I find that there's almost a distinction between grappling martial artists and striking martial artists. Like if you take like boxing versus wrestling, for example, like in boxing, they're almost in it because they like the fight.
Mm-hmm.
They like to feel like they're
Yes.
inflicting, and like they like to know that they can like deal some damage. But with wrestling, it's almost like they like to test their own self grit. You know what I mean? Like,
I would probably agree with a large part of that.
Yeah.
I mean, I work with some very, very high level wrestlers, and not a single one of them has a mean bone in their body.
yeah,
Like they're not throwing somebody into like a power half Nelson trying to drive your elbow into the ground.
yeah,
Because you just want to cause pain.
yeah,
They like the technical aspect. Yes, it's a physical sport. Wildly physical. Probably tougher than just about anything else on the planet. I would argue that heavily. However,
Yeah, I could
they're not
agree
in
with
it to wreck the other guy.
yeah.
Right? It's technical. You're trying to unbalance them. Yes, you have to cause some pain in order to get them to move. But the goal is not the causing of the pain.
Yeah, it's not to knock them out.
Right. Whereas, in kickboxing, it's like, I'm going to annihilate your leg to the point where you can't stand on it anymore.
Yeah. It's like to the
You
point
have to have
where,
some level of sadism there, right? Like
No,
you're trying to
absolutely.
hurt the guy.
Yeah, yeah, and you go in there and it's like, with wrestling, it's like the better man's going to come out of that ring, but it's based on like, technicalities
Sure.
and stuff, right? Somewhat. And then when it comes to boxing, it's like,
Sometimes it's the tougher guy.
yeah, if I don't knock you out, you're going to wish I did by the
Right.
end of this match.
Right,
It's
exactly.
gonna be one
Sometimes
of
it's the
those.
guy that's tougher, right?
Yeah.
I work with one fighter in particular that his moniker is designed around that, right? Like, I'm just going to keep coming.
Yeah.
If you don't kill me, I'm going to make your day hell.
It's the Rocky Balboa
Yeah,
approach.
exactly.
Yeah.
I block punches with my face, but I'm going to give them just as bad, and
Yeah.
you're going to take it worse.
By the end of this match, my face is going to look like a piece of meat.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a prime steak.
Right.
And yours is going to be ground beef.
Yeah,
Like, it's-
exactly.
Yeah.
And I don't mind.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I like it. Oh,
Yeah. Like
so those guys are just different.
Yeah, I never like. I'm a big pacifist that way myself. Like getting into wrestling, even that was kind of like my own attempt at trying to be like,
The tough guy.
I guess so. Or just proving
why
to
I did it.
myself that I could handle something like that, right? Because I hate fights. I don't like the
I did
feeling.
too. I hated it. That's
Yeah.
why I did it. I bounced for 5 years.
Yeah. Oh fuck.
Like,
Jesus. Yeah.
I did everything in my power not to fight
Yeah. Yeah. And then
because I
like
hated it.
yeah, and you get guys who go into boxing, and like most of the boxers that I know definitely had an aggression issue
Yep.
when they were younger.
They like to
and
fight.
they needed to find an outlet for that.
Yeah. So at
And-
least it was legal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Now you have people to tell you when to stop beating them up. And
Right.
that's about it.
The bell stops you. You're like
Yeah.
Pavlov's dog.
Yeah. Yeah.
Bell
Exactly.
rings and you go on.
Yeah, I find that's one of the most interesting things about martial arts is like it's almost like the offense defense mentality split into grappling and striking.
Yeah. It's some. Yeah. That's not wrong actually.
Yeah.
There's probably some crossover, but
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely some crossover somewhere, but I think it's kind of like I don't know, it's like if MMA is the yin yang, right? Then
Yeah.
like grappling and striking
Are the
is like
extreme ends
yin
of it,
and the
yeah.
yang, right? Yeah. So it's kind of it's really neat to see that, and like to see. I don't know, like do you find that people from one end of that spectrum take instruction better than the other, or like what do you find as far as like when you're training a wrestler versus a boxer? What's the wrestler generally being more, I guess, what do they come around to faster? Like, what do they learn faster?
I don't know if I have an answer for that. I'm really lucky in the fact that I don't work with people that I don't want to. I don't have to take on a client that I don't jive with. I only really like working with people that are coachable. If I have to like browbeat you into doing what I'm asking, it's probably not going to go well because again, I'm not an aggressive person. So I'm not going to be the guy that yells at you when you're doing something wrong or the one that, messages you all the time. I'm not going to be the one that rides your ass about what you're doing on the weekend.
Get out of
There's
the
strength
gym
coaches.
and there's the coach.
There's well-known strength coaches out there that, have threatened to phone athletes' moms because, they went for a drink at their friend's wedding, like stupid shit like that. Like, and they exist. You're like, wow, it's inappropriate. Like, you're an idiot.
It is a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. Like you're an asshole. You're just a control freak. It has nothing to do with the coachability of the athlete. You just feel like it is. I only like working with people that have the ability to kind of keep open mind and learn things. So they tend to come around to it. I think combat sports does do that because again, if you don't learn, get your ass handed to you. Like if you can't just figure out combat sports for the most part. You might have a long time ago when they first were being developed, but nowadays they're so technical that you can't just watch YouTube videos and assume that you're going to be really, really good at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, like it's not you can't just like remember when you were growing up, you used to think like I don't know if you did, but for me it was like I've watched every Jackie Chan movie.
Yeah.
I know I could kick your ass. You know?
Yeah, you're like, because Drunken Master taught you everything that you need to know.
Yeah.
Like we've seen those videos on YouTube. We know the Russian guys that have done that, right? It's not super effective. It's comical.
And then you get into the first fight of your life, and you're like, nope, this is nothing like what it looks like in the movies.
Why did I throw 4 punches and now I can't breathe?
Yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah, exactly. It's just a wild topic, man. The world of combat sports, like it goes back so far to like wrestling back in like the ancient Roman Olympics
thousands
and
of years
stuff.
old.
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, it's arguably the first sport, right?
Yeah, true enough.
Probably racing and wrestling, running and wrestling are probably the first 2 sports.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I'm not a historian or like a
Neither am I, or unless it's somebody like throwing a rock at a target. Right? I bet you I can hit that boulder, better than you can.
Yeah.
But probably foot races and probably wrestling.
cool. So with all that, I feel like we've covered a lot. Like as far as like
I think that was like a ping pong ball of topics. It was
yeah,
pretty good, actually.
yeah. I have one more that I wanted to approach just because
Sure.
we did touch on it earlier, the aspect of mental health and mindsets. I'm wondering what do you find in your clients that helps them most with their mental health through the exercise, and like what also helps with like I guess I just want to talk about mindsets and like what you've seen to help mental health and the mindset of determination.
Oh,
most.
that's so individual. Yeah. I mean, I have 2 athletes that I work with that are sisters that are so intrinsically self-motivated it's scary.
Mhm.
They get anxious if they miss practice. They're those kind of people. Like there's nothing that's going to stop them from being confident with what they do. They're just so in tune with it. But like I'm good. I'm all right. I got this.
Mhm.
I have other athletes that need to talk to a therapist on a regular basis. They have a really hard time with self-visualization.
Yeah.
They have a lot of negative self-talk that they have to learn to eliminate. They overanalyze mistakes. They dwell on them. It's really dependent on the person. I don't think it's possible these days to get to a high level of sport without doing some form of kind of therapy, mental health maintenance. Yeah. Again, I think just because the world itself is a little bit more hard on people that way, because our stressors are not as direct anymore. You're not worried about, famine and saber-toothed tiger. You're worried about, what somebody said about you online or reputation, things like that. So the stresses just last longer and it affects your body in a little bit of a different way. And I think that's harder on an athlete's mental health. And again, because your losses are more public, right? You didn't just lose at a high school tournament. Now you lost at a high school tournament. It was publicized, right? It was live streamed and everybody saw you get, pinned.
Yeah.
Right?
That was the first wrestling match I ever did. Lost, right? At my school. Mom was right there. I ran to the washroom first time I cried.
Yeah, for sure.
In a sport ever. Didn't happen ever, like I didn't end up crying after a loss anytime after that.
But that
again.
first one was gnarly, right? Yeah.
It's a real eye opener,
It is. And you either have the capacity to come back from it or you don't. And I think, some of that can come from you being a kid and being raised to be a resilient person, understanding that failure isn't catastrophic and it's okay. But a large part of it is intrinsic, people that are just tough that way and people that really can't handle that kind of letdown.
Do you think an attitude towards failure like that, though, do you think that's developed, like learned? Or do you think it's...
I don't have an answer for you. I mean, I think it largely is. If the way that you're brought up, failure is the worst thing ever, I think that's pretty negative.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
I mean, because then you're so afraid of it. And when it happens, you're fragile.
Yeah, I used to think that a lot. Like, if you fail, you might as well give up. But, like, failure is like...
It's just learning.
Yeah. First attempt.
Actually, I know that if you listen to other podcasts, like guys like Jocko Willink and things like that talk about jiu-jitsu being a bit of a superpower. Yeah. Which I think is kind of comical. But, wrestling jiu-jitsu, one of the things that you learn very, very quickly is losing is the fastest way to learn.
Absolutely, yeah.
You have to do it wrong so that you can figure out what the hell to do right the next time.
Yeah.
The minute you get that stuff through your head and you stop associating loss with a negative side of things and you can start to go, okay, well, that was a learning experience.
How can I change?
I think that's so much more beneficial. And unfortunately, in today's day and age, we don't let people lose. We don't let it be a learning experience anymore.
No.
Now it's just we want to. I'm not convinced that it's as bad as social media and things make it out to be. You know, I've spoken to a lot of people in the States, and you know, they don't have participation medals for every single person that runs in an event and things like that. It's not that bad. I think you see the extremes, but I'm sure it's probably something like that. It's probably easier than it used to be.
Well, I know that was speaking personally. Again, it was I got a lot of those participation ribbons when I was younger.
Yeah,
and it was like it really did teach me that even if I suck at something, I'm still going to get something out of it.
True,
but
but at least it's a participation ribbon. It's not like the same size trophy as the guy that won.
Yeah, that's
you know what I mean? The guy that won still got the big one, right?
Yeah,
you got the red ribbon.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like, thanks for showing up.
Yeah,
but you know, as long as the loss is not considered a negative, it's like, yeah, you didn't win, but did you learn something from it? Like, you know, if the one thing that parents could do well with kids is two things. One, if and when they lose, because chances are they will, if you can teach them that it's still about whether or not they had fun. Like, did you enjoy it? Yeah. I didn't like losing. Okay, you don't have to like losing.
Yeah.
But did you like playing? Yeah, playing was fun. Okay, then let's concentrate on that. And what did you learn from losing? Well, I learned I didn't like losing. Yeah, okay, we know that part. What did you learn from it? Well, I did this thing wrong, and then he did whatever. Okay, so now we need to work on that one thing. As long as you can create an educational component to it. But yeah, I think it's the hockey parent, thing where they get too involved and they live vicariously through their kids. And as long as that doesn't happen, I think for the most part you can create a lot of positive from the loss. And most athletes that work at a reasonably high level, most people that work at a reasonably high level will have failed and come through it on the positive side of things. Entrepreneurs learn that lesson pretty early for the most part. Like, you do stuff wrong and you go, "Oh, that didn't work." And so most entrepreneurs were never successful the first time. Yeah. In fact, I think it's the vast majority.
Yeah, my dad was one, and he never really got successful at all.
I mean,
sorry, Dad, I love you.
I don't know. I'm kind of in that boat too. I run a successful gym, but it's not like I don't have 18 locations, right?
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, I think guys that start big companies, they go through and they, go bankrupt. Oops, that didn't work. Try again, right? And it's not, the whole, get knocked down 9, get up 10 kind of thing. But I'm not sure it's just the resilience. It's just the fact that you're willing to try again, right? Willing to go, okay, I learned from that, as opposed to just being too stupid to stop.
Yeah. I think I'm the second for sure. That's great. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, so we're getting up to the end here, so I just wanted to ask you one piece of advice for somebody struggling to get control of their life through, like, they feel they want to lose weight, they want to be in better shape, they just want to feel overall better. And out of your experience in this line of work, I feel like you might have a good generic piece of advice. And I know it's probably going to be something like eat better, work harder, whatever, right? But is there any little tidbits of help you can drop for someone like that?
Yeah, because I don't take my own advice. I'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And it's going to seem oddly self-serving based on the nature of what I do for a living. Get a coach.
Get a coach. Okay.
When you're anybody that has a hard time knowing where to start, it's because the way that the world is today, you have so much information readily available, and it's often very conflicting. You need to have somebody in your corner that can take the guesswork out. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I don't know what to eat. Okay, well, we're going to try this to start off with. Well, what about these other things? Don't worry about that for now. We're just going to try this. We might play with those later. But they give you at least some direction to follow. And they kind of keep it, they're like bumpers on a bowling lane, right? You might kind of deviate, but they're the ones that kind of keep you on track. No, we're just going to do this. No, we're just going to do this. We're going to do this exercise program. Well, I want to try this thing. Okay, we can try that, but let's just start here. So find somebody to help you along the way. Don't feel like you absolutely have to do it alone, right? There's lots of people that do low-level coaching services for not a lot of money. If you need a lot more help, there's a lot of people that will charge an arm and a leg and breathe down your neck the entire time. If that's what you need, you can get somebody that holds your hand the whole way. But oftentimes getting somebody to help, finding somebody to be in your corner is probably the best way, because there's so much information. You need somebody to weed through the bullshit.
And maybe try and keep it outside of your realm of social circle, right? Like you want to coach outside.
Way more so. Yeah. That's probably even more important. Hire somebody you don't know, like that has a decent reputation, but hire somebody that you don't know. Like I try not to work with family, or I discourage people from working out with their spouses and things like that. Not because I don't think it's necessarily a great idea, but if you talk to any boxing coach, like, don't train your partner.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't, the dynamic, it's really hard to keep professional. So I recommend finding somebody that's outside of your social circle to do that with. Absolutely.
Awesome. All right, cool. Well, you guys heard that. Just like your therapist, you wouldn't go to therapy with your cousin. So don't take coaching from your uncle.
That's probably even more important.
Yeah. And that's going to wrap up today. Thanks for listening, everyone. This was The Deficit. I'm here with TJ. If you want to give some shout outs, TJ, feel free. Any one of the cameras, just, your social media handles, whatever it is.
I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on, but don't worry about that one. TJ Sider for my Instagram stuff. You can follow my gym, which is Strongside New West. Or you can just email me, tj@thestrongside.ca. I can answer any questions that you might have.
Awesome. Thanks. We're out. See you later, guys.
Thanks very much.
You'd want to. I wanna see me through your eyes, or the outlines, even that'll do. I wanna read in between my lies. Color me radiant, color me true, color me a night so black that it's blue. Picture me a moment, honest and it's you. 'Cause I know, oh, you painting. I know, veiled woman, carved in marble divine. Ooh, frame me, oh I beg you. Cage me in your finest gold. Restore me with clay, oh I vow to be still. I'm yours for your hands to mold. Oh Raffaello, won't you see me as your muse? Sculpt me into a beauty, it's long overdue. Chisel me with billows, engrave me anew. 'Cause I know, oh, you painting. And I know, veiled woman, carved on marble divine. Ooh, ooh, a smile. And I know, veiled woman, carved on marble divine. I know